A warm wind drifts across the desert floor, carrying with it the faintest scent of dust and ancient stone. The kind of scent that only emerges when something long buried begins to stir. The sun has barely risen above the cliffs of Amarna, its first rays spreading like thin gold threads over a landscape that once beat with the pulse of a forgotten kingdom. Most mornings here are silent, but not today. Today, the desert is holding its breath. A lone figure crouches near a shallow trench carved into the sand. His brush moves slowly, almost cautiously, as if afraid of waking something that has slept for more than 3,000 years. The archaeologist is not here by accident. A week earlier, one of his workers had spotted an unusual shard jutting out from the rubble, small, unassuming, yet covered in markings that did not match any common pottery. It looked almost like writing, but writing from whom? And why here, in a place stripped bare by time and ruin? The brush reveals more of the shard's surface. The archaeologist leans closer, letting the sunlight strike the clay at just the right angle. The symbols come alive, not hieroglyphs, not cuneiform, not anything he recognizes at first glance. They feel wrong, or perhaps too right, like something meant to be found only when the world was ready. His breath hitches. He lifts the shard gently, turning it between his fingers. There is a trembling line carved unevenly, almost frantic, as if the writer's hand shook with urgency or fear. Whoever wrote this was not documenting an event. They were confessing something. The desert around him remains silent, but the air feels heavier now. The ruin of AKHENTEN, the once vibrant city of Akhenaten, lies in scattered bones of limestone around him. To many, this place is a footnote in Egyptian history, a failed experiment, a heretical detour. But the archaeologist knows better. He knows that the sands here do not bury things without reason. They protect them. He kneels to examine the ground again, his fingers tracing a faint outline beneath the dust. More shards, possibly from the same tablet. His pulse quickens. He brushes faster, revealing the broken edges of what seems to be a larger inscribed piece. As the fragments emerge, the writing becomes clearer, the lines darker, the message more unsettling. He reads the first complete phrase in the sand. "My light speaks, but the world will not hear me." An icy ripple travels down his spine. He recognizes the tone. Not the words, but the desperation behind them. Only one Egyptian ruler ever wrote with that kind of trembling conviction. Only one king ever believed he heard the voice of a god directly in the sun's rays. The archaeologist whispers the name under his breath, as if testing the possibility. Akhenaten. For centuries, the world has speculated about this enigmatic pharaoh, the man who shattered Egypt's pantheon and replaced it with a single, formless deity, Aten. Scholars have debated his motives. Was he a mad dreamer? A spiritual revolutionary? A tyrant seeking control by reshaping belief? Every theory contradicts the last. His enemies destroyed nearly all records of his reign, leaving behind only fragments of temples, broken statues, and a single haunting legacy. The city of the sun that he built and abandoned. But this writing, this is something else entirely. This is not a decree, not a hymn carved by priests, not official propaganda. This is a voice, private voice, a confession from the shadows of a king's soul. The archaeologist's hands shake as he gathers the fragments. He arranges them on a flat board, aligning the edges carefully. The words begin to connect, forming sentences that have not been read by human eyes since the age of pharaohs. Some lines are incomplete, missing pieces lost to time, but enough survives to reveal the tone. Urgent, fearful, intimate. These are letters, not addressed to officials, not to queens or children, but to someone unknown, or perhaps to something. He lifts the largest shard to the light again. The inscription continues, "If the dawn finds me unworthy, let the truth remain hidden until a kinder age." The archaeologist feels the dryness in his throat. Why would Akhenaten write such words? What truth was so dangerous he felt it had to be sealed away until the world changed? His heartbeat drums faster. Every great discovery in Egypt comes with a moment when excitement begins to sharpen into unease. This is that moment. He spreads a map of the excavation site on the sand, marking where the fragments were found. The location is not random. It sits at the edge of what once formed a private chamber inside the house of the king, a place where Akhenaten retreated for solitude, far from the eyes of priests and officials. Historians long believed nothing important remained here. Now the ground seems to whisper a correction. A gust of wind sweeps across the ruins, sending loose sand swirling around his feet. It feels almost like a warning. The archaeologist ignores it. He is too consumed by the mystery unfolding in his hands. He kneels again, digging slightly deeper into the trench. More fragments appear, thin, fragile, but covered in the same trembling script. Dozens of pieces, maybe hundreds, enough to suggest that this was more than a single message. This was a collection, a set, letters written and then intentionally buried, hidden from the world. The sun climbs higher, casting sharper shadows across the abandoned city. The archaeologist wipes sweat from his brow, but his focus never breaks. Something inside him, a voice not unlike the one perhaps Akhenaten believed he heard, tells him that he has crossed a threshold, that history is about to shift. He holds another shard to the light. This one bears only 4 words, but they strike harder than any he has read so far. They will destroy me. He glances up at the ruins around him, the broken altars, the shattered statues, the empty foundations of a city erased by the empire that succeeded it. The words were not a prediction. They were an acknowledgement. Akhenaten knew. A chill spreads through the desert heat. If these letters truly belonged to the heretic king, then they were written in his final days, days filled with fear, betrayal, and a faith that consumed him from within. What secrets did he put into writing, knowing his enemies would burn every trace of him? What revelations lie buried in the fragments still waiting in the sand? The archaeologist gathers the pieces carefully, as if they might shatter beneath his touch. He stands, gazing out over the ruins. The city is silent, but no longer empty. It is speaking again. And buried somewhere beneath this ancient ground is a message meant for the future. A message that has finally begun to reveal itself. Long before he became the most divisive ruler in Egyptian memory, he was simply a quiet child wandering through palace corridors too large for him, shadows stretching across limestone walls like watchful spirits. The royal residence of Amenhotep III pulsed with luxury. Gold, dancers, incense, feasts held to honor gods whose names filled the very air. But none of it touched the boy who kept to himself. He seemed almost swallowed by the grandeur, as if he belonged to a different world. Servants whispered that he avoided the noise of the court. Tutors complained that his mind drifted, wandering toward windows and sunlight instead of scripts and royal protocol. Even his mother, Queen Tai, a woman of immense political intelligence, often watched him with a mixture of love and worry. She sensed something unusual in him, something that did not fit the shape of a future pharaoh. Palace life was a battlefield behind velvet curtains. Royal children were raised with affection in public but competed fiercely in private, for approval, for visibility, for survival. The boy who would one day be Akhenaten grew up surrounded by brothers whose laughter was louder, whose athleticism drew praise, whose ambitions aligned neatly with expectations. But he was different, not weak, exactly, more like delicate, as though the world pressed too heavily on him. He suffered from bouts of exhaustion, headaches, and long periods of silence during which he stared at the floor or the horizon without blinking. Physicians called it frailty. Priests whispered of a curse. His mother alone believed he had been touched by something divine, though she feared it might destroy him. He wandered often into the temple courtyards, drawn by the shafts of sunlight piercing through stone columns. While other children played with carved toys or practiced ritual greetings, he stood motionless in the warm beam as though listening. Those who saw him described a strange stillness in his posture, a quiet intensity that unsettled the priests. They would escort him away quickly, muttering prayers to ward off whatever strange influence might be whispering to the boy. The court scribes recorded dreams attributed to him during childhood, dreams filled with light, not figures, warmth, not voices. He claimed the sun spoke without speaking, communicating through feeling rather than words. Adults dismissed it as imagination. But the dreams didn't stop. They became more vivid, more insistent, lingering in his mind long after sunrise. Sometimes he woke trembling, convinced that what he'd seen was not a dream at all, but a calling. In a royal court defined by tradition, such experiences were dangerous. The priests of Ammonius wielded extraordinary influence, their rituals binding together the state and the heavens. Anything that deviated from accepted belief was quietly smothered. Already, some among the priesthood viewed the boy as a potential threat, not because he acted against them, but because he existed outside the predictable rhythm of their world. A ruler shaped by visions would not be easy to control. A ruler who listened to an invisible god could one day challenge the powerful gods carved in stone. His father, Amenhotep III, observed him from a distance. The great pharaoh was aging by then, weighed down by decades of rule, victories, alliances, marriages, and the never-ending attention of priests who ensured the gods stayed pleased. He barely saw the quiet child who lingered at the court's edges. To him, this son was an afterthought, one among many, probably not destined for the throne, perhaps not destined for much at all. But fate has a way of creeping into stories through cracks no one notices. A sudden illness swept through the palace one summer, claiming one of the older sons. Then another died during a hunt gone wrong. Rumors spread of bad omens, divine disapproval, angry spirits. Whatever the cause, the quiet boy who had once been considered irrelevant began drifting closer to the line of succession. If the court feared him before, they feared him more now. Servants began watching him carefully. Advisors reported on his movements. Priests tried to draw him into their rituals, hoping to shape him before he ascended. But the boy remained distant, untouched by their efforts. He participated when commanded, but the gestures were mechanical, as though he were performing motions that meant nothing to him. What stirred him, what brought actual life to his eyes, was something far simpler: the morning sun rising over the palace walls. He often escaped at dawn to stand on the eastern terrace, watching the light spill across the horizon like a crown of fire. Those who observed him during these moments believed he was praying to Ammonius, as custom demanded. But they were wrong. He prayed to something else, something he did not yet have a name for, only a sensation that filled him with warmth and clarity. A presence without a face. His mother noticed the change before anyone else. She confronted him gently one afternoon, asking what he sought in the sun's rays. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice soft but unshakably certain, he told her, "There is only one who listens, only one who answers." Tai felt a chill pass through her. She was not a woman easily frightened, but those words carried something that felt ancient, older than temples, older even than the gods carved into Egypt's stone. His youth continued under this strange shadow, a blend of royal training and spiritual solitude. He learned diplomacy, but his mind drifted. He learned ritual, but his heart resisted. He learned the power of tradition, but he felt the pull of something that asked him to break it. As he reached adolescence, palace intrigues deepened. Rivals whispered that he lacked the force to rule, that he was too frail, too detached, too strange. Some even speculated that he should be sent to a quiet villa in the north, kept comfortable and out of the way. But the more the court pushed him aside, the more intensely he felt the presence of the unseen god pressing into his destiny. By the time his father's health began to decline, the boy had already changed inside. He was still quiet, still withdrawn, but there was something new behind his eyes, a conviction forged in solitude, shaped by dreams and sunlit whispers. Every dawn seemed to pull him closer to the path he would one day walk. He was no longer the frail child trembling before the world. He was someone waiting, someone preparing, someone chosen, perhaps not by the kingdom, but by the light that had followed him since birth. And the closer death crept toward his father, the more the sun seemed to burn with expectation. The world, though no one yet realized it, was about to become his. The palace courtyard shimmered with heat, the kind that made the air ripple and bend as if reality itself were wavering. The young prince stood alone in the center of it, eyes lifted toward the morning sky. The sun had not fully risen yet, but its growing glow stretched across the horizon like the slow opening of an enormous golden eye. He watched it the way others watched living creatures, with attention, with curiosity, with something that hovered between awe and recognition. He had always felt drawn to the light, but now it felt different. Stronger, more deliberate. It no longer seemed like the sun was simply rising. It felt like it was reaching for him, as if calling. He closed his eyes and let the warmth settle across his skin. The palace behind him murmured with distant sounds. The clatter of servants sweeping corridors, the low chanting of priests preparing morning offerings, the shuffle of guards changing shifts. None of it reached him. Instead, he heard a faint hum. Not a voice exactly, but an impression, a sense of presence. Something that touched him not through sound, but through feeling. Every time he came to this courtyard, it was there, waiting. He tried once to describe it to a tutor who asked why he lingered so long under the sun. The tutor listened politely before giving a gentle explanation about the importance of honoring Ammonius, the gods, the rituals. The prince nodded, but the words washed over him without meaning. What he felt did not match the teachings. The priests told him that the gods dwelled in temples, in statues, in sacred objects blessed with ritual. But the presence he sensed was not trapped in stone. It flowed like light, could not be carved or captured. It existed everywhere and nowhere. The more he thought about it, the more unsettling the realization became. The thing he felt did not belong to the world of Ammonius, Isis, Osiris, or any of the countless deities whose names filled Egypt's prayers. It felt older, purified, singular. He tried to ignore it. He tried to immerse himself in traditional worship, to bow before the statues, to recite hymns along with his tutors. But when he stood in the dim halls of Ammonius' great temple, the presence disappeared. The stone walls felt heavy, suffocating. The scent of incense clouded his mind. The statue's carved eyes stared at him with cold indifference. And beneath the chanting of priests, he felt an emptiness he did not have words for. Only when he stepped back into the sunlight did the world breathe again. Over time, the feeling grew sharper. It began to follow him in the quiet hours of the day, soft whispers of warmth brushing against his thoughts during lessons, during meals, even during moments when he should have been sleeping. He would lie awake in his chamber, staring through the small window at the stars, sensing the faint glow of the sun hidden beyond the horizon. There were nights when he woke abruptly, heart pounding, convinced that something had spoken to him without sound. Images swam before his eyes, shapes of light, patterns that shifted and dissolved like smoke. He would sit up, breath trembling, unsure whether he had experienced a dream or a visitation. These moments frightened him at first. They made him feel disconnected from the world around him, from the expectations of court life, from the heavy responsibilities that came with royal blood. But gradually, fear gave way to recognition. Whatever this was, dream, vision, or something else, it felt as though it belonged to him. Or perhaps he belonged to it. One afternoon, he found himself standing beside a pool in the palace gardens. The surface reflected the sun in perfect clarity, a circle of molten gold rippling with the breeze. He leaned over it, staring at the shifting light. For a moment, he imagined the glow reaching upward from the water, curling around his hands, lifting him into an embrace only he could feel. He whispered to the water, though he did not know who or what he was addressing. "Why do you speak to me?" But there was no answer, only the reflection trembling in the pool. Still, he sensed meaning in the silence. He felt as though he were standing on the edge of a truth too vast to understand. A truth that pressed against him, urging him not to look away. His mother noticed the change. Queen Tai was not easily deceived. She saw the new calm in his movements, the strange focus in his gaze. One evening, she sat beside him on the balcony overlooking the Nile, the river glowing like a ribbon of bronze in the fading light. She asked what troubled him, what he sought. The prince hesitated before answering. "It's in the sun," he said finally. "When the light touches me, something speaks." Tai did not laugh. She did not dismiss his words as childish fancy. Instead, she turned her eyes toward the setting sun, her face unreadable. She had seen omens in her life, visions that shaped kings, dreams that carried warnings. She was no stranger to the things that existed beyond sight. But she also knew what danger such experiences could bring. A prince who listened to an unseen power could threaten the balance of the empire. A king guided by visions could ignite the fury of the gods' guardians, the priesthood. She told him gently to be cautious, to keep such thoughts to himself. He nodded, but inside, he felt the distance between them widen. How could he hide what felt like the very core of his being? More and more, he withdrew from the rituals of the palace. He stopped joining the ceremonies of Ammonius, giving quiet excuses to his tutors. He began writing small notes, private reflections, trying to capture the feeling of the unseen presence that filled him. The words were clumsy, incomplete, but each line felt like a step closer to understanding. He wrote of warmth, of guidance, of a God without form or face. A God not trapped in temples, but alive in every breath of light. He did not yet call it AKHENTEN. He had not yet imagined the revolution he would one day unleash. But the seed was there, buried deep, growing quietly in the dark. When the sun rose each morning, the prince felt something inside him rise with it. A pull, promise, a destiny unfolding one ray at a time. He did not know it yet, but the God who had no image was already shaping his path, already preparing him for a future no one in Egypt could yet imagine. The light had chosen him, and he was beginning to choose it in return. The palace corridors of Thebes were alive with whispers. Every footstep echoed against marble and limestone, carrying news, rumors, and subtle warnings. The young prince moved among them like a shadow, half seen, half ignored, but always observed. The courtiers noted his pale hands, the way his gaze lingered on sunlight streaming through high windows instead of on their flattery. They whispered about the boy who did not play the games of princes, the boy who seemed to belong to another world entirely. Inside the grand hall, priests of Ammonius bent their attention to him with thinly veiled suspicion. They watched the way he tilted his head when the incense smoke rose, how he sometimes refused to bow long enough to touch the floor. Some whispered that he was already dangerous, that his strange ways were not mere childlike eccentricities but a rebellion waiting to happen. Others dismissed him as fragile, a boy too weak to ever rule. But the whispers alone were not enough to erase what they could not see. The light that followed him, the strange attentiveness of the sun upon his shoulders, as though it had chosen him. His tutors tried to teach him the sacred rites, the hymns, the proper reverence for gods and ancestors. He repeated the words, imitating devotion, yet inside, his mind wandered. He imagined the sun itself rising above the Nile, warming him directly, unmediated by stone or ritual. He wrote small notes in secret, etched on scraps of papyrus, small prayers or questions that he could not yet say aloud. "Why does the world worship shadows instead of the light?" one read. Another, "Will they ever understand what I feel when the sun touches me?" The palace, however, was no place for private contemplations. Eyes were everywhere. Some of his siblings were jealous of the attention he received from tutors, wary of his strange influence on servants, fearful that this boy who listened to sunlight might one day eclipse them. Others were indifferent, more concerned with games, with feasts, with triumphs in hunting or wrestling. But the priests remained vigilant. They watched him in silent corridors, in chambers where the sunlight could not reach. They recorded every deviation from tradition, every hesitation, every unusual gesture. And yet, he was already beginning to assert a subtle form of rebellion. It was not violent, not loud, not even fully conscious. He began to refuse certain rituals, citing reasons that sounded simple enough to placate his tutors. "I must rise early to study the sky," or "I must speak with the scribe about my lessons." But each refusal was calculated, measured, a small declaration that he was not like the others. And every time he turned to the light of the sun instead of the shadows of the temple, he felt the faint thrill of power, the kind that comes from following a truth others cannot yet perceive. In private chambers, he wrote again. This time the notes were longer, almost letters, although he did not address them to anyone living. He addressed them to the sun, to the warmth that touched him, to the presence he felt behind its glow. He described visions of temples unmade, gods unshackled, and a world reshaped by light. Sometimes these notes trembled with fear. Sometimes they burned with certainty. Some he folded and hid in the backs of drawers. Some he pressed under the stones of his bedroom floor. Each was a confession and a declaration at once, a secret rebellion written in the quiet hours of morning. The boy's isolation grew. Friends were scarce. Tutors could not reach the intensity of his focus, and the priests could not bend him to their will. He wandered the palace terraces alone, sometimes speaking aloud to the sun, sometimes simply staring into the horizon. There was an air of tension that even his family could not fully understand. Tai, his mother, observed him with a mixture of pride and anxiety. She knew that a child who could hear a god's voice, even if only in sunlight, was a child who could either save or destroy a kingdom. Rumors began to spread. Courtiers whispered that he had visions, that he wrote secret notes no one else could read, that he spoke to something invisible. Some feared that the boy was touched by madness. Others believed he had been chosen by the gods themselves. Behind closed doors, the priests debated their next steps. They could guide him, control him, perhaps even harness this strange connection to the sun. Or they could fear it, suppress it, and hope that time would make him conform. But the boy, the future Akhenaten, had no intention of conformity. Each secret note, each stolen moment in sunlight, each subtle defiance was a thread in a larger tapestry that only he could see forming. The palace, with all its power, its rituals, its whispering walls, could not contain him. The presence that followed him, the light that answered him, was shaping him into someone beyond tradition, beyond fear, beyond expectation. And as he lay awake at night, the palace quiet and still around him, he pressed another piece of papyrus into a hidden compartment beneath his bed. The words he wrote were trembling with the weight of a destiny he could barely imagine. I must follow the light, though the world may burn against me. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the city of Thebes carried on, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding in one chamber, in one boy, in one soul attuned to a god no one else could see. The boy's first rebellion was not a shout, nor a battle. It was a refusal to bow completely, a refusal to submit to the shadows, a turning instead to a god who existed in warmth and brilliance. The palace would soon feel the tremors of this rebellion. The priests would notice the patterns, the deviations, the secret letters. And though the boy was still small, still fragile, still untested, the beginnings of a faith that would shake Egypt to its foundations were already being written in the quiet light of dawn. He was learning, slowly, that obedience was not his destiny. Light was, and the world, whether ready or not, would one day be forced to see it. The day he ascended the throne, Egypt held its breath. The air in the palace was thick with incense and expectation, the murmurs of courtiers and priests blending into a low hum that echoed off limestone walls. The young pharaoh, no longer a boy but not yet fully a man, stood on the dais of the great hall, his gaze fixed on the golden sun rising above the horizon. To the assembled crowd, he was Akhenaten, the new ruler of a kingdom built on tradition, on gods as old as the Nile itself. But inside, he carried something far older, far stranger, far more dangerous. A vision that would soon consume not only him, but the very fabric of Egypt's religion. The coronation was ceremonial perfection. Crowds chanted his titles, priests raised scepters, nobles presented gifts, and musicians struck notes meant to resonate with the heavens. And yet, while the kingdom celebrated, the new pharaoh's mind was elsewhere. He was not looking at the people. He was looking at the light, at the sun piercing the eastern horizon, at the brilliance that had followed him since childhood. That was where his loyalty lay, not in temples, not in statues, not in the sprawling hierarchy of gods that dictated every aspect of Egyptian life. Aten, the invisible god of light, awaited his devotion. From that moment, his reign was unlike any other. Immediately, subtle changes began. Statues of Ammonius and other gods were left untouched for days at first, then gradually removed from prominent positions. Rituals were shortened or altered. Temples were no longer the center of his attention. The open air, the courtyards, the terraces where sunlight fell unimpeded became the stages for his worship. And behind closed doors, in private chambers away from the eyes of officials and priests, he wrote letters, confessions, conversations with a god no one could see. These letters were unlike anything Egypt had ever known. They were not hymns to be sung or carved into stone. They were personal, vulnerable, urgent. He spoke of doubt, of fear, of a responsibility that weighed heavier than any crown. He wrote of the sun, its warmth and brilliance, as if it were a living being capable of listening, capable of understanding, capable of forgiving. In some passages, he pleaded. In others, he commanded. And always, there was the undercurrent of isolation. A king surrounded by a kingdom yet utterly alone in his devotion. The courtiers and priests did not yet understand. To most, the young pharaoh's decisions appeared whimsical or eccentric. Some whispered that he was mad, others that he was naive. Only a few close advisers began to grasp the depth of his intent. Even Nefertiti, his queen and partner in this unfolding revolution, could see the brilliance and danger in his vision. She watched him not with fear, but with a cautious understanding. There were times when she would enter his private chamber and find him kneeling before sunlight spilling through a high window, parchment in hand, quill trembling in devotion or anxiety. She never interrupted. She never asked questions he could not answer. Outside, the kingdom began to shift. Temples grew quiet, some empty for the first time in centuries. Priests of Ammonius, the guardians of the old order, whispered in corridors, plotting subtle resistance, calculating how best to survive under a ruler whose devotion did not include them. The people, for the most part, did as they were told, celebrating the coronation with gifts, dances, and feasts, unaware that the very foundations of their spiritual life were being dismantled. But those attuned to the subtle pulse of history noticed change. The way ceremonies were shortened, the way statues were covered or moved, the way courtiers whispered nervously in shadowed halls. Amid all this upheaval, Akhenaten's letters became a lifeline, a tether to his sanity. Some were hurried scrawls on scraps of papyrus. Others were carefully composed documents, folded and stored in secret compartments or beneath the floors of private chambers. In these writings, he addressed Aten directly, asking questions no mortal could answer. He poured out his confusion, his guilt, his longing for guidance. And in the margins, he wrote for himself, fragments of thought that might have seemed trivial to any observer but carried the weight of destiny. One fragment reads, "If the priests oppose me, it is not anger that I bear but sorrow. They do not understand the light. I am not their enemy. I am only the servant of what they cannot see." Another, "The city I will build must be a home for this vision, a sanctuary where the sun itself may dwell with us, where no shadows will choke its warmth." These were not decrees. These were confessions, admissions that his path would be lonely, that obedience to tradition had become impossible, that the faith he was about to impose was both salvation and curse. By the end of the first year of his reign, subtle signs of transformation were visible throughout Egypt. Statues of Aten began appearing in courtyards. Open-air altars replaced enclosed temple spaces. Music, art, and architecture began to reflect a new style. Elongated figures, intimate family scenes, depictions of the king in constant communion with the sun. Observers could not have known it, but these innovations were more than aesthetic choices. They were part of a spiritual revolution, encoded in every line of stone and brushstroke. Yet for all his outward strength and innovation, Akhenaten remained vulnerable. The letters reveal a man caught between inspiration and fear, devotion and doubt. In them, he writes of conspiracies whispered in corridors, of the impossibility of convincing a kingdom to abandon gods that had defined their existence for millennia. Some passages are frantic, almost desperate. "I fear my city will crumble before it is finished. I fear my faith is too great for the hearts of men. Guide me, O light, guide me. And still he persists. His resolve strengthens with each sunrise. The city of AKHENTEN, the horizon of the sun, begins to rise from the desert, stone by stone, terrace by terrace. Every corner, every street, every altar is planned not just as a place of worship, but as a testament to his vision, his devotion, his unwavering commitment to AKHENTEN. Yet beneath the foundations of this shining city lie the earliest drafts of his letters. Fragments of hope and fear, warnings and prayers, confessions of a pharaoh who dared to follow a god no one else could see. By the time he celebrates the first official festival of AKHENTEN, Egypt is already a kingdom divided between the traditions of the past and the vision of the future. The priests watch silently, uneasy, aware that this king will change everything. Yet no one fully understands him. Not his advisors, not the nobility, not even his own family in their entirety. Only the light understands. Only the sun, unbound by temple walls or rituals, listens as the pharaoh writes his devotion, his fears, and his most intimate secrets onto papyrus, into stone, and into the hearts of those who will inherit his legacy. And somewhere, in a quiet chamber beneath a terrace bathed in sunlight, Akhenaten dips his reed pen in ink, pauses to breathe the golden warmth on his hands, and begins another letter. A letter that no one else will read for millennia. A letter that carries the weight of revolution, the intimacy of confession, and the fragility of a man who dares to rewrite the heavens themselves. The words appear on the page in steady, determined strokes. I am the servant of light, and though the world may not yet see, I will build a kingdom that follows its truth. The young pharaoh has begun his transformation, from isolated boy to visionary king, from believer in a private God to the architect of a spiritual revolution that will shake Egypt to its core. And though he does not yet know the trials, betrayals, or sorrows that await, he writes as one who knows his purpose, guided by the sun, by AKHENTEN, and by a destiny that will not be denied. She entered the hall like a sudden breeze, unnoticed at first, yet impossible to ignore once she moved closer. Nefertiti, the queen, carried herself with a quiet power that seemed almost otherworldly. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, measured every gesture, every expression, every whispered reaction of those around her. To the court, she was beautiful, flawless, untouchable, a symbol of grace and divine favor. But to Akhenaten, she was more than that. She was a partner in a vision that few could comprehend, a confidant in a kingdom that was beginning to tremble under the weight of sunlight and secrecy. From the moment she joined him in the rituals of AKHENTEN, she understood the gravity of his devotion. She watched him kneel in courtyards flooded with morning light, the wind stirring the folds of his robes, the sun catching the gold leaf of his ceremonial staff. She saw how he spoke to the light as though it were a living presence, how he whispered secrets and fears in ink on fragile papyrus, hiding the words beneath floorboards, in drawers, and within walls no one would think to examine. Nefertiti did not mock him. She did not dismiss his faith as childish fantasy. Instead, she became his mirror and his anchor. She practiced the gestures of the sun god alongside him, learning to move in harmony with the light, to understand its rhythm, to witness the visions that seemed to shape his very being. When he faltered in doubt, when his letters trembled with fear, she was there, quietly steadying him, whispering encouragement that he rarely admitted he needed. Yet she also saw danger long before anyone else. She observed the subtle resistance building in the priesthood of Ammonius, the way ministers and scribes exchanged worried glances, the cautious, almost conspiratorial murmurs behind tapestries and columns. She understood that every public decree, every alteration of ritual, every statue moved or altar repurposed carried risk, not only to him but to herself, to their daughters, to the fragile new kingdom he was building in the desert. And still she chose to stand by him, not as a pawn, not as a silent figurehead, but as an active participant in a revolution of belief. In private chambers, her role was even more crucial. While the courtiers debated the propriety of a pharaoh who worshipped a god no one could see, Nefertiti acted as interpreter, mediator, and protector. She handled messages from the priests, fielded the questions of envoys, and ensured that the delicate threads of political survival remained unbroken. All the while, she knew that behind every letter Akhenaten wrote, Behind every sketch of Amarna rising from the desert lay not just devotion, but vulnerability. A vulnerability that enemies could exploit if they discovered the depth of his fears and convictions. There were mornings when she would enter the sunlit courtyard before the court assembled, finding him already on his knees, quill in hand, writing letters to Aten. She would pause at the doorway, listening to his muttered words, sensing the mixture of awe, uncertainty, and obsession that poured from him like molten gold. Sometimes, she would step forward and lay a hand gently on his shoulder, a silent reassurance that he was not alone. He would glance at her, eyes flickering with gratitude and an intensity she had come to understand. And yet, despite her closeness to him, there were moments when even she could not follow the full reach of his thoughts. His devotion had grown into something almost untouchable, a private world of sunlight, ink, and whispered prayers that few could access. She did not question it. Instead, she learned to move alongside it, adjusting herself to the rhythm of his faith, anticipating the consequences of actions that the court and the priests could not yet see coming. Nefertiti also bore witness to the human side of the pharaoh. In letters she sometimes glimpsed, fragments he left in drawers or beneath floorboards, she saw not only reverence, but doubt and fear. She read the confessions of a man who wondered if his kingdom, his family, and his very life would survive the revolution he had undertaken. She saw the lines trembling with worry for their children, for the legacy of a city that was only beginning to rise from the desert sands. These were not the words of a tyrant, nor of a reckless dreamer. These were the words of a man carrying the weight of a destiny he could barely control. Even as the city of AKHENTEN began to take shape, Nefertiti understood the symbolic importance of her role. The art commissioned by the king increasingly depicted them together, intimate, equal, in constant communion with the sun. She was present in public ceremonies, in altars and reliefs, in hymns sung to Aten. But the letters, the true confessions, the unrecorded conversations, those remained their secret world. There, she offered counsel, comfort, and sometimes caution, knowing that a single misstep could undo years of effort, collapse the fragile new order, or cost them both their lives. Yet her support was not blind. She questioned him privately, challenging his decisions when necessary, pointing out the vulnerability of the palace, the subtle dissent among the officials, the growing tension in a kingdom not yet ready to abandon centuries of tradition. These moments of challenge were rare, quiet, and almost ritualized. But they mattered. In the delicate balance of faith, power, and survival, Nefertiti's voice acted as both guide and anchor, grounding the pharaoh while allowing him to soar toward the vision only he could see. And through it all, she bore witness to his letters, the secret corpus that would one day astound generations. These writings, scattered across the palace and hidden beneath stones, reveal not only devotion but love, longing, guilt, and fear. They are addressed sometimes to Aten, sometimes to herself, sometimes to unnamed heirs or the unseen future. In every line, Nefertiti saw the full spectrum of a king's humanity, a man who could command nations yet tremble before the brilliance of the sun, who could dismantle centuries of tradition yet remain tender to those he loved. Together, they moved through the revolution of light with a delicate choreography. He reached for the divine. She grounded him in the human. He risked everything in faith. She safeguarded the kingdom against the inevitable fallout. And in that delicate partnership, something extraordinary took shape. A bond that was political, spiritual, and deeply personal. A union of vision and pragmatism, of devotion and wisdom. It was Nefertiti who first understood that the secret letters, the hidden confessions of the pharaoh, were more than personal writings. They were the emotional core of a revolution, a roadmap of fear, courage, and destiny. And as she watched the young king kneeling before sunlight, quill in hand, she realized that history itself would be shaped not only by the decisions made in public, but by the quiet devotion, the whispered guidance, and the unspoken partnership forged between a king and his queen in the private chambers of Amarna. For Nefertiti, there was no doubt. The revolution belonged to both of them. The faith that would shake Egypt, the city that would rise in defiance of the old gods, the letters that would survive when statues were smashed. All of it was a joint creation, a testament to a partnership that was as spiritual as it was political. And in her heart, she understood that without her vigilance, without her insight, the brilliance of Akhenaten's vision might never have survived the turbulence of a kingdom unready to accept it. She did not fear the light. She embraced it, and in doing so, she became not just the queen beside the king, but the silent thunder, the unseen hand guiding, protecting, and witnessing a revolution that would echo across millennia. The city of AKHENTEN rose from the desert like a vision etched in sunlight. Stones, quarried from distant hills, gleamed gold in the morning light, reflecting a brilliance that seemed almost unnatural against the ochre sands. Workers moved in perfect rhythm, guided not only by overseers but by the silent insistence of a king whose vision had become an obsession. Streets were laid out with purpose, terraces and courtyards positioned to capture the first rays of dawn, altars aligned so that the sun itself could move freely across the city without obstruction. Every detail carried meaning. Every angle was devotion. The pharaoh walked among the laborers each morning, robes flowing behind him like a river of gold, his presence both inspiring and intimidating. He did not merely observe. He directed, corrected, and sometimes paused to adjust stones himself, touching the blocks as if infusing them with divine intention. His quill, which had traced the letters hidden beneath floors and in secret chambers, now guided entire streets. Each measurement, each orientation, was dictated by the principle of sunlight, the invisible hand of Aten shaping the world through him. AKHENTEN was unlike any city Egypt had ever seen. There were no massive temples enclosed by walls, no shadowed sanctuaries reserved for priests alone. Instead, the structures were open, airy, and light-drenched. Columns rose like the ribs of a giant living creature, supporting terraces where citizens could witness the sun's journey across the sky. Statues of the pharaoh and his family reached toward the heavens, arms extended, eyes lifted in perpetual worship of the invisible God. The city itself became a hymn, a prayer in stone and sun. The priests of the old order watched from afar, their anxiety growing by the day. Whispers in corridors spread like wildfire. The king builds a city for no god we know. He abandons tradition. He disrupts the balance of Egypt itself. Their fear was not merely spiritual. It was political. The power of the priests had always been entwined with the gods they represented. Remove the gods and their authority crumbled. Remove the gods and you disrupt the very fabric of the kingdom. And Akhenaten, in his devotion to Aten, was dismantling that authority piece by piece, sunbeam by sunbeam. Yet the people, for the most part, followed the king's lead. Curiosity, loyalty, and awe drove them. Farmers and artisans, once accustomed to the rhythms of Thebes and Memphis, now labored under the relentless heat of the desert with a sense of purpose they had never felt before. They built temples to light, roads aligned to the sun, homes designed to welcome its warmth. Children played in courtyards designed to catch the morning glow, oblivious to the tension brewing in the shadows of power. And at the center of it all, Akhenaten moved like a conductor, orchestrating the city and its inhabitants in a devotion both spiritual and political. Art in AKHENTEN reflected this new ideology. Reliefs on walls depicted the pharaoh and his queen, Nefertiti, in constant communion with Aten. Their family was bathed in sunlight, their expressions elongated, serene, almost otherworldly. Scenes of daily life, children playing, citizens working, offerings made, were suffused with golden light. Even the simplest tasks were transformed into acts of worship, evidence that the ordinary and the divine could coexist under the guiding brilliance of a single god. In the privacy of the palace, Akhenaten continued his correspondence with the unseen. Letters and confessions poured from him like a river, addressing Aten, recording fears, cataloging doubts, and offering gratitude. Nefertiti remained by his side, sometimes reading fragments, sometimes interpreting meaning, sometimes simply listening as he poured his soul onto papyrus. These letters were no longer just personal devotions. They became guides, blueprints for the kingdom, codifying a theology and a vision that would challenge centuries of tradition. Some passages, preserved for posterity, read like prayers to an unseen companion. Guide me in this work, that the city may reflect the light as it flows across the desert. Teach me patience when laborers falter, when stone refuses my hand, when doubt creeps like shadow at dawn. Others reveal vulnerability rarely associated with a pharaoh. I am alone in the eyes of men, yet surrounded by the warmth of your presence. Let this light protect my family, my city, and the faith I bear. These letters were both intimate and revolutionary, confessions of a ruler attempting to reorient not only the kingdom but the hearts and minds of all who dwelled within it. Yet the resistance to this radical transformation was subtle but persistent. Priests of Ammonius circulated warnings in hushed tones. Nobles expressed quiet disapproval. Scribes documented events with careful neutrality. And foreign envoys noted the unusual emphasis on sun worship with unease. The court's tension was palpable. At every feast, every ceremony, every official meeting, eyes flickered toward the king to gauge his reaction to dissent. Akhenaten, however, remained unfazed. His confidence was rooted in something older than politics, older than tradition. The undeniable presence of Aten, guiding, compelling, commanding him to continue. Despite the enormity of his task, Akhenaten found moments of solitude in the city. Early mornings were his own, before the workers arrived, when he could stand on terraces, watch the desert stretch endlessly toward the horizon, and feel the first rays of the sun touch his face. These were the moments when inspiration flowed most freely, when letters were written with the most urgency and care. Each dawn seemed to carry a message, each sunrise a reminder that his mission was not merely earthly but divine. The construction of AKHENTEN also carried a personal and political risk. Every stone laid, every statue raised, every altar erected was a visible departure from centuries of established faith. By building a city devoted to a single god, Akhenaten was not merely changing architecture. He was reshaping the identity of Egypt itself, and he did so fully aware that resistance could manifest in secret conspiracies, betrayal from advisors, or even violent rebellion. But his letters reveal a man who understood the stakes yet embraced them. I build not for myself, nor for glory, but for the light that guides me. Let those who oppose understand that the sun is not mine alone to command, but mine to serve. As the city grew, it became a living testament to Akhenaten's devotion. Streets aligned with the rising sun, open courtyards allowed light to flood homes. Temples were designed not as closed sanctuaries, but as stages for worship bathed in radiance. Every element of AKHENTEN reinforced the king's message, that the sun itself was the source of life, faith, and order. And in this living city, the secret letters remained, hidden beneath floors, in drawers, in spaces no one dared look. Confessions, guidance, prayers, and warnings from a king who saw beyond the world as it was and imagined the world as it could be. By the time the first grand festival of Aten was held in AKHENTEN, the city was complete enough to host the entire court and citizens in a ritual unlike any Egypt had ever known. The sunlight flooded the courtyards, reflecting off polished stone and gilded altars. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their family stood at the center, arms outstretched, faces lifted, offering themselves in eternal communion with a god unseen by human eyes. Music filled the air, children danced, and the citizens followed the king's example, basking in the radiance of the sun. And yet, beneath the triumph, there was a quiet tension, the knowledge that this revolution had only just begun. The letters scattered throughout the city, hidden but sacred, would endure long after the festival, long after this king, long after this dynasty. They were the heartbeat of AKHENTEN, the inner voice of a pharaoh who dared to defy tradition, rewrite faith, and speak directly to a god the world had yet to understand. Akhenaten had not merely built a city. He had begun an era, a revolution of light, letters, and unwavering devotion that would echo across centuries, leaving a legacy both brilliant and fragile, intimate and universal, sacred and profoundly human. The city of AKHENTEN thrived under the harsh desert sun, each day an exercise in devotion and endurance. Streets of carefully laid stone reflected light so brilliantly that the city seemed to shimmer, a mirage of gold and alabaster rising from the ochre sands. Citizens moved with purpose, guided by both the orders of the pharaoh and the subtle choreography of sunlight that fell across courtyards, streets, and temples. It was a city designed not for shadows but for illumination, a kingdom built on rays, not stone alone. Akhenaten walked these streets each morning, observing the flow of life, adjusting the course of laborers, directing the placement of altars, and ensuring that every building, every open space, served the divine purpose of Aten. The letters he continued to write, hidden in drawers and beneath floorboards, documented not only rituals and instructions but also reflections on the human spirit, the fragility of obedience, and the eternal pull of divine light. They were confessions, declarations, and blueprints of faith all at once, the private voice of a king shaping a city and a civilization in real time. Within the palace, Nefertiti remained a constant presence, not as a decorative figurehead but as a partner in governance, theology, and vision. She understood the precarious balance of power, the subtle threats that lurked in the whispers of priests and the cautious glances of nobles. She guided Akhenaten when he faltered in doubt, translated his complex devotion into policy and ceremony, and mediated the tensions that inevitably arose in a kingdom attempting to follow a god unseen by human eyes. Together, they forged a spiritual and political partnership unparalleled in Egyptian history. Art in AKHENTEN reflected this radical departure from tradition. Reliefs portrayed the royal family bathed in light, with elongated forms and tender gestures that emphasized intimacy and divine communion. Children played beneath rays of sun depicted as golden discs with arms extending to bless the family. Citizens worked, offered gifts, and worshipped under the ever-present radiance, their lives intertwined with the king's vision. Even the simplest daily acts, preparing food, carrying water, tending animals, were transformed into sacred performances, expressions of devotion to a god visible only in light and warmth. Outside the city, the priesthood of Ammonius and other traditional deities watched with growing alarm. Their influence, built over centuries, was being quietly dismantled. Temples lay empty or were repurposed. Rituals were shortened or replaced. Altars once sacred to multiple gods now served only one. The balance of power had shifted without a single act of open rebellion. Yet their fear was palpable. They knew that to openly challenge the pharaoh would risk immediate reprisal, exile, or worse. They began to record and preserve their opposition in secrecy, codifying prayers and warnings for a future they hoped would reverse this radical devotion. Meanwhile, Akhenaten's letters became more urgent, more introspective. In the privacy of his chambers, he wrote not only to Aten but to his own conscience, cataloging fears, doubts, and strategies. Some letters were instructions for city planning, others were moral guidance for citizens, and still others were confessions of loneliness and uncertainty. One fragment reads, "I am surrounded by the eyes of men, yet none see what the sun shows me. I am the servant of light, and light alone will guide this kingdom." These writings were a blueprint for a spiritual revolution, revealing a ruler attempting to reconcile human frailty with divine purpose. The construction of AKHENTEN continued with relentless precision. Streets were aligned to the sun's path, terraces were placed to catch first light, and altars were designed for maximum exposure to warmth and brilliance. Workers moved as if in a sacred rhythm, guided by overseers and by the invisible principle of light itself. Every stone, every beam, every alignment served the dual purpose of function and faith, a physical manifestation of the king's devotion and his vision of Aten as the sole god. The social structure of AKHENTEN evolved in tandem with its physical architecture. Citizens were assigned roles not only for survival but for participation in sacred observances. Music and dance were integrated into daily life, ritualized even in the mundane. Families were encouraged to worship together openly, reflecting the royal family's own devotion in private and public. Children learned to respect light as a guiding force, while artisans and laborers contributed to the city's spiritual as well as physical construction. Every action became a reflection of the invisible God, shaping behavior as much as belief. Yet not all transformations were welcomed. Some officials resisted subtly, finding ways to maintain old traditions in secret. Courtiers who had served under Amenhotep III struggled with the loss of ritual, hierarchy, and status. Even within the palace, minor disputes arose over resource allocation, labor, and the direction of city projects. Akhenaten, however, was unyielding. His letters show meticulous attention to these matters, balancing firmness with encouragement, punishment with praise, and devotion with practicality. Every decision was informed by his faith in Aten and his understanding that the light demanded obedience not only from the people but from the very city itself. The first grand festival of Aten in AKHENTEN marked a turning point. Sunlight flooded the open courtyards, gilded altars sparkled, and citizens, nobles, and officials participated in rituals that celebrated not only the king but the god he served. Music, dance, and poetry intertwined in a performance designed to honor the sun's life-giving energy. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters stood at the center, faces uplifted, arms extended, embodying devotion and leadership. For a brief moment, the city itself seemed to pulse with divine presence. Every stone, every beam, every child and laborer attuned to the rhythm of light. In the private chambers, Akhenaten's correspondence continued. Letters that once were hesitant now carried the authority of a king deeply confident in his vision. Yet they also revealed the emotional weight of responsibility, the toll of solitude, and the precariousness of his experiment. If the kingdom falters, one reads, "Let it be known that I served only the light. Let my actions be judged not by men but by the sun itself." These writings, hidden and protected, were the unseen pulse of AKHENTEN, the heart of a city built not only of stone and sand but of devotion, fear, courage, and vision. Even as the city thrived, dangers persisted. External threats, rival kingdoms, opportunistic generals, and envoys from distant lands loomed on the horizon. Internal dissent remained, concealed behind loyalty, decorum, and fear. Yet the brilliance of Akhenaten's faith was unmatched. It radiated from him, influenced the architecture, inspired the citizens, and illuminated the hidden corners of the city where letters and confessions accumulated. By the time the sun reached its zenith on the day of the festival, AKHENTEN was fully alive, a living testament to one man's vision, devotion, and willingness to defy centuries of tradition. The letters, the architecture, the art, and the social rituals combined to create a city that was at once physical and spiritual, personal and universal, revolutionary and fragile. And within the palace, Akhenaten and Nefertiti continued to guide, protect, and nurture their creation, aware that history would judge them both, and that the city itself was a message sent through time. The legacy of AKHENTEN, built in sun and stone, lived not only in what the world could see but in what remained hidden. The letters, the secret reflections, the private confessions of a king and queen who dared to reimagine the divine. And in those private moments, as the sun's rays touched the king's face and Nefertiti stood at his side, the revolution of light, faith, and devotion reached its most profound expression. A kingdom transformed by vision, sustained by love, and illuminated by the unseen hand of Aten. His letters show meticulous attention to these matters, balancing firmness with encouragement, punishment with praise, and devotion with practicality. Every decision was informed by his faith in Aten and his understanding that the light demanded obedience not only from the people but from the very city itself. The first grand festival of Aten in AKHENTEN marked a turning point. Sunlight flooded the open courtyards, gilded altars sparkled, and citizens, nobles, and officials participated in rituals that celebrated not only the king but the god he served. Music, dance, and poetry intertwined in a performance designed to honor the sun's life-giving energy. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters stood at the center, faces uplifted, arms extended, embodying devotion and leadership. For a brief moment, the city itself seemed to pulse with divine presence. Every stone, every beam, every child and laborer attuned to the rhythm of light. In the private chambers, Akhenaten's correspondence continued. Letters that once were hesitant now carried the authority of a king deeply confident in his vision. Yet they also revealed the emotional weight of responsibility, the toll of solitude, and the precariousness of his experiment. If the kingdom falters, one reads, "Let it be known that I served only the light. Let my actions be judged not by men but by the sun itself." These writings, hidden and protected, were the unseen pulse of Akhenaten, the heart of a city built not only of stone and sand but of devotion, fear, courage, and vision. Even as the city thrived, dangers persisted. External threats, rival kingdoms, opportunistic generals, and envoys from distant lands loomed on the horizon. Internal dissent remained, concealed behind loyalty, decorum, and fear. Yet the brilliance of Akhenaten's faith was unmatched. It radiated from him, influenced the architecture, inspired the citizens, and illuminated the hidden corners of the city where letters and confessions accumulated. By the time the sun reached its zenith on the day of the festival, Akhenaten was fully alive, a living testament to one man's vision, devotion, and willingness to defy centuries of tradition. The letters, the architecture, the art, and the social rituals combined to create a city that was at once physical and spiritual, personal and universal, revolutionary and fragile. And within the palace, Akhenaten and Nefertiti continued to guide, protect, and nurture their creation, aware that history would judge them both, and that the city itself was a message sent through time. The legacy of Akhenaten, built in sun and stone, lived not only in what the world could see but in what remained hidden. The letters, the secret reflections, the private confessions of a king and queen who dared to reimagine the divine. And in those private moments, as the sun's rays touched the king's face and Nefertiti stood at his side, the revolution of light, faith, and devotion reached its most profound expression. A kingdom transformed by vision, sustained by love, and illuminated by the unseen hand of Aten. The 20th century brought both new challenges and new opportunities for understanding Rapa Nui and its monumental moai. By this time, the island's population had stabilized after the devastating impacts of disease, slavery, and social upheaval in previous centuries, but the cultural and spiritual continuity that had sustained the moai for generations had been deeply disrupted. Many statues remained toppled or damaged, their ahu crumbled, and traditional rituals had been largely supplanted by external influences. Yet amid these challenges, a renewed interest in archaeology, anthropology, and preservation began to emerge, providing a pathway to recover knowledge, honor heritage, and illuminate the ingenuity of a once isolated civilization. Early explorers and researchers arrived with curiosity and admiration, documenting the moai and ahu in unprecedented detail. Photographs, sketches, and measurements captured the scale and craftsmanship of the statues, but many early interpretations reflected Western biases, often underestimating the technical and organizational sophistication of the Rapa Nui. Theories abounded, some fantastical, some grounded in earnest inquiry, about how a small population could have carved and transported massive statues without modern tools or machinery. These investigations, though sometimes flawed, laid the groundwork for a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the island's culture and the extraordinary achievement represented by the moai. At the same time, the Rapa Nui people themselves began to reclaim agency over their cultural heritage. Local knowledge keepers, elders, and families who had preserved stories, chants, and ritual practices provided critical insight into the purpose and methods behind the statues. Their oral histories offered explanations of transportation techniques, ceremonial practices, and the symbolic meanings of specific statues and platforms. These accounts challenged purely mechanical interpretations of the moai, revealing the integration of engineering, ritual, and social coordination. Through collaboration between researchers and the islanders, it became increasingly clear that the moai were products of a sophisticated society that harmonized spiritual belief with practical knowledge. Efforts to restore fallen moai and damaged ahu accelerated during this century, blending traditional insight with modern archaeological techniques. Teams carefully documented sites, studied construction methods, and experimented with techniques to re-erect statues. Some projects successfully returned moai to upright positions, providing not only structural insight but also renewed spiritual and cultural significance for the local population. Restoration was both a technical challenge and a symbolic act, reconnecting the living community to its ancestors, reinforcing identity, and revitalizing a sense of collective achievement. Scientific advancements also deepened understanding of Rapa Nui's environmental history. Studies of deforestation, soil erosion, and climatic patterns revealed how human activity and ecological constraints had shaped the development, placement, and sustainability of the Moai. Archaeologists began to see the statues not simply as isolated objects of art, but as central elements in a broader environmental, social, and spiritual system. The combination of limited resources, labor organization, ritual practice, and ancestral veneration explained both the ingenuity and the eventual challenges faced by the islanders in sustaining monumental construction. The mid-20th century also saw a surge in global fascination with the Moai, fueled by media, documentaries, and popular literature. Rapa Nui became synonymous with mystery and ingenuity, inspiring scholars, adventurers, and tourists alike. While this attention brought economic opportunities, it also raised questions about preservation, cultural appropriation, and the ethics of archaeological intervention. The need to balance global curiosity with respect for the islanders' traditions became increasingly apparent, emphasizing that understanding the Moai required not just technical analysis but cultural sensitivity and collaboration. During this period, new experimental archaeology demonstrated how the Moai could have been walked into place using ropes and coordinated rocking motions. These experiments, conducted with both scaled models and full-size statues, confirmed oral histories and provided empirical evidence for methods that had been dismissed for centuries. The results bridged the gap between myth and mechanics, revealing the profound ingenuity of Rapa Nui engineering and the importance of oral tradition in preserving practical knowledge. This convergence of science and tradition highlighted the Moai as dynamic cultural artifacts, embodying both material skill and spiritual purpose. In parallel, anthropologists began documenting contemporary Rapa Nui culture, tracing how traditions had survived, adapted, and integrated with new influences. Music, dance, storytelling, and ceremonial practice offered insight into the ways spiritual and social knowledge continued to circulate even after the disruptions of the previous century. These living traditions demonstrated that the Moai were not relics frozen in time. They were embedded in a dynamic cultural context, interacting with the community across generations, influencing social structures, and reinforcing collective memory. Education and cultural revival became central themes during this century. Schools, museums, and local programs worked to transmit knowledge about the Moai, the island's history, and ancestral practices to younger generations. By fostering awareness and pride, these efforts helped ensure that the legacy of the Moai would not only be preserved as historical artifacts but remain relevant in the living culture of Rapa Nui. In this way, the 20th century was a period of both recovery and redefinition, reconnecting people to their ancestors while navigating the pressures of globalization, tourism, and historical scholarship. Ultimately, this era underscores the duality of the Moai as both historical and living symbols. They are monuments to human ingenuity, spiritual devotion, and social organization, but they are also conduits for memory, identity, and cultural resilience. The 20th century witnessed the convergence of archaeology, local knowledge, restoration, and public fascination, creating a renewed understanding of the Moai's significance. These statues are no longer viewed solely as mysterious relics of a lost civilization. They are celebrated as enduring testaments to the vision, skill, and perseverance of the Rapa Nui people. Through restoration, research, and cultural revival, the Moai regained relevance as anchors of identity, spirituality, and communal pride. They remind us that history is not merely a record of the past but a living, evolving dialogue between people, place, and memory. The work of this century reaffirmed that the Moai, despite centuries of upheaval and isolation, continue to embody the creativity, resilience, and sacred purpose of a civilization that transformed stone into a timeless reflection of human endeavor and belief. The king's charisma, combined with the brilliance of the city, created an environment in which faith could be cultivated organically, even amid dissent. The priests of Ammonius, however, were relentless. They recorded every deviation, every alteration, every disruption of centuries-old practices. They preserved their rituals in secret, hoping for a future when the old order could be restored. Envoys, travelers, and scribes documented the radical transformation of Egypt, noting with awe and apprehension the unprecedented alignment of politics, religion, and personal devotion. And yet, despite all opposition, Akhenaten's vision continued to unfold. The city of AKHENTEN thrived, the people adapted, and the king's faith deepened, guided by letters that were both confessions and manifestos, reflections of a ruler who saw himself as a servant of light, not men. In the hidden chambers of the palace, the pharaoh wrote one letter after another. Some were addressed to Aten, others to his conscience, others to the future. If the kingdom falters, let it be recorded that I served only the light. Let the faith I bear illuminate those who come after me, even if they cannot see what I see today. The letters are deeply human. They reveal fear, doubt, vulnerability, and the immense weight of responsibility. Yet they also radiate conviction, courage, and the unwavering belief that divine purpose justifies the rebellion against centuries of tradition. AKHENTEN itself became a living testament to these letters. Streets aligned with the rising sun, open-air courtyards captured the brilliance of daylight, and temples functioned as spaces for both work and worship. Citizens, nobles, and laborers alike participated in rituals designed to honor Aten, often unaware that their actions were guided by both architecture and ideology. Every stone, every design, every daily routine became a reflection of the invisible God, a constant reminder that faith and life were inseparable. And so, the kingdom continued under the watchful gaze of sunlight. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who wrote letters to a god no one else could see, led a revolution of light, letters, and architecture. His vision challenged centuries of tradition, reshaped a city, and tested the faith and loyalty of everyone around him. Yet within his hidden letters, preserved beneath floors and behind walls, lies the emotional core of this transformation. A king who dared to follow divine light, risking everything, yet fully aware of the human cost. In the end, the priests of Ammonius, the courtiers, and the citizens of Egypt could only watch as history unfolded. AKHENTEN rose as a city of light, a testament to a pharaoh's devotion, and a kingdom transformed. And somewhere, in secret chambers, Akhenaten's letters continued to record the intimate, revolutionary, and profoundly human journey of a king whose faith reshaped the course of a civilization. The tension within AKHENTEN had reached an invisible crescendo. Streets, altars, and courtyards radiated sunlight, but the shadows of dissent lingered in hallways and private chambers. Akhenaten's devotion to Aten had transformed the kingdom, yet the human element, the fragility, jealousy, and fear that had always accompanied power, remained a potent force. The king understood that the revolution he orchestrated with light and architecture was far from complete. The old gods, and those who served them, still whispered in hidden corridors, plotting quietly, waiting for a chance to reclaim influence over Egypt. In private chambers, the pharaoh continued his correspondence with the unseen. These letters, scattered beneath floors and hidden within walls, reveal the duality of a king caught between divinity and mortality. He wrote of inspiration, of creative brilliance sparked by the sun, and of the radiant energy that guided every decision. Yet interwoven with these triumphs were confessions of fear of failure, of rebellion, of the isolation that comes with challenging centuries of tradition. Each line is a delicate balancing act, a negotiation between the ambition of a God's servant and the vulnerability of a mortal ruler. Nefertiti remained at his side, the quiet force that anchored him amid the maelstrom of change. She understood the subtle danger of every decree, the potential cost of every alteration to ritual, and the social upheaval caused by a kingdom suddenly asked to abandon familiar gods. Together, they navigated the precarious intersection of faith, governance, and human emotion. Her counsel was often the bridge between divine vision and practical reality. When the king faltered in doubt, her presence reminded him that he was not alone, that the city and its citizens depended on his strength, but also on her wisdom. Meanwhile, the old priesthood did not remain idle. The followers of Ammonius and other deities adapted their tactics to survive in this new world. Temples that once hosted grand ceremonies were repurposed, closed, or abandoned, yet the priests found ways to maintain influence through subtle persuasion, secret rituals, and the preservation of sacred texts. Envoys and scribes reported to distant lands that Egypt was undergoing a radical transformation, a kingdom no longer fully governed by tradition, yet still tethered to the old order by the fears and loyalties of its people. Akhenaten's art and architecture became not merely aesthetic expressions but instruments of belief. Reliefs depicted the royal family immersed in sunlight, children playing beneath rays that emanated directly from the golden disk of Aten. Everyday life was imbued with devotion. Workers, farmers, and artisans performed their labor in constant awareness of the sun's presence, and through their routines, they participated in the spiritual revolution. The letters hidden in private chambers documented these changes in detail, outlining the king's intentions and strategies for ensuring obedience while cultivating belief in a god unseen by the vast majority of his subjects. Yet as the city thrived, cracks began to appear in its social and political foundations. Some courtiers resisted subtly, maintaining old rituals in secrecy, while others questioned the wisdom of abandoning centuries of tradition so abruptly. The king's letters reflect acute awareness of these risks. I see doubt in the hearts of men, even in those who claim loyalty. One fragment reads, "Let my vigilance guide them, for the sun alone can illuminate the path where shadows linger." These writings reveal a ruler who understood the fragility of faith, the challenges of persuasion, and the personal cost of spiritual revolution. The construction of AKHENTEN also became a stage for testing loyalty. Streets were meticulously aligned to capture the sun's journey across the sky, terraces and courtyards positioned to maximize illumination, and temples and altars designed to facilitate communal worship. Laborers, artisans, and citizens all participated in acts of devotion, often without fully comprehending the ideological weight behind their tasks. The city itself became a living text, a blueprint of belief where every physical element reflected the philosophical and spiritual vision of the pharaoh. During one festival of Aten, sunlight poured across the open courtyards and gilded altars, illuminating the city in a display that left observers in awe. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their children stood in the center, arms extended, faces lifted toward the golden disk above. Music, dance, and poetry intertwined in performances that were simultaneously civic and sacred. Citizens, initially uncertain, began to participate with growing fervor, gradually internalizing the devotion the king demanded. Yet even amid triumph, the hidden letters reveal the inner tension. The king's awareness that the devotion of men can be fleeting, that the power of light must constantly be nurtured, and that opposition could surface at any moment. The letters themselves evolved, reflecting the growing confidence and determination of the pharaoh. Some were devotional, addressing Aten directly with intimate reflections on light, power, and duty. Others were strategic, documenting plans for urban development, ritual reform, and the cultivation of public faith. A few were personal confessions, candidly acknowledging the fear of isolation, of betrayal, and of the enormous responsibility of ruling a kingdom that had once worshipped countless gods. "I walk among men yet see the sun alone," one reads. "I am both servant and master, and yet I fear that the work may be undone before its time." Akhenaten's private life became inseparable from his public mission. Nefertiti, ever watchful and wise, provided the guidance and stability he required, interpreting his vision into practical governance, while ensuring the city continued to function smoothly. Together, they embodied a duality that became central to the identity of AKHENTEN, the inseparable union of divine inspiration and human oversight. Their partnership was both political and spiritual, a silent covenant that shaped the destiny of the city and its people. Even as progress continued, the priests of the old order documented every deviation, carefully preserving their rituals and texts in secrecy. They hoped, perhaps, for a restoration of the old ways, or at least for the survival of their knowledge should Akhenaten's experiment fail. Envoys traveling beyond Egypt's borders reported the changes with awe and apprehension. A kingdom illuminated by sunlight, where traditional religion had been replaced by a singular devotion, and where the pharaoh's personal vision dictated not only governance but belief itself. The transformation of art, architecture, and ritual created a living city that simultaneously inspired devotion and enforced it. Reliefs depicted the king and his family in intimate communion with Aten, citizens and laborers performing acts of daily life, rendered sacred by alignment with sunlight. Even the mundane became monumental. Letters, hidden yet vital, detailed these processes, recording the king's attention to both faith and practical logistics. Every decision, every correction, every note in the margins of a papyrus reflected a ruler acutely aware that belief, like architecture, must be built carefully, stone by stone, word by word. In these moments, Akhenaten emerges not as a distant deity or an abstract king, but as a profoundly human figure. His devotion is sincere, but it is inseparable from the heavy burden of leadership. His letters reveal vulnerability, fear, and uncertainty, yet also remarkable courage and clarity of vision. He understood that history would judge him not only by the monuments and rituals he established but by the faith he inspired, the city he built, and the courage with which he challenged centuries of tradition. By the time the festival of Aten concluded, AKHENTEN had become a city of contradictions. Radiant yet fragile, revolutionary yet precarious, magnificent yet vulnerable to the human elements of jealousy, fear, and dissent. The letters scattered throughout the city preserved the inner life of a pharaoh who dared to follow the light, charting a course through uncharted spiritual and political territory. These documents remain the invisible thread binding the city together, the testament to a ruler whose faith, courage, and humanity shaped a kingdom for centuries to come. In the end, Akhenaten's vision of a kingdom devoted entirely to Aten was more than architectural or political. It was a human experiment in devotion, courage, and belief, meticulously documented in letters that survived hidden from the eyes of all but the most vigilant. The pharaoh's private words, combined with the radiant city he built, form a testament to the delicate interplay of light, faith, and human ambition. And somewhere, in the hidden spaces beneath AKHENTEN's terraces and altars, those letters whispered their truths across generations, preserving the intimate story of a king, a queen, and a kingdom bathed in the brilliance of the sun. The desert wind swept across the terraces of AKHENTEN, carrying grains of sand that sparkled in the brilliance of the sun. From above, the city appeared as a living jewel, its streets and temples perfectly aligned to catch the rays that defined every facet of life. Every block of stone, every sunlit courtyard, every golden relief testified to the devotion of a pharaoh who had dared to reimagine the foundations of Egypt. And yet, behind the splendor, shadows lingered. The subtle resistance of those unwilling to abandon tradition, the quiet fears of citizens adjusting to a radically new world, and the constant tension that comes with transforming the heart of a civilization. Akhenaten's letters, hidden in secret chambers beneath the palace floors, reveal the depth of the psychological and spiritual burden he bore. They are intimate, revealing not only a king's devotion to Aten but also his human vulnerability, the fear that the revolution he had set in motion might collapse, leaving his family, his city, and his faith exposed to ruin. In one fragment he confesses, "I am a servant of the light, yet alone in the eyes of men. Let the sun see my deeds, for no mortal heart can fully understand them." These words capture a ruler simultaneously inspired and haunted, a man aware of both the beauty and the danger of defying centuries of tradition. Nefertiti's presence remained indispensable. She was not merely a queen, but a stabilizing force, a mediator between the divine vision of her husband and the practical realities of the kingdom. She guided, advised, and intervened when subtle unrest threatened the city's delicate order. In private, she read fragments of Akhenaten's letters, interpreting meaning and offering reassurance. Together, they created a partnership that was both deeply human and profoundly revolutionary. A union of intellect, devotion, and mutual understanding, each complementing the other in ways that allowed a kingdom to bend, but not break, under the weight of unprecedented change. The priests of Ammonius and other deities were growing desperate. The removal of statues, the repurposing of temples, and the public prominence of Aten left them struggling to preserve authority and ritual. Some priests attempted subtle manipulation, seeking to influence citizens and courtiers who remained loyal to the old ways. Others documented every alteration in secret, preserving their knowledge for a future in which the traditional gods might rise again. Yet Akhenaten's city and his devotion were relentless. Every stone laid, every street aligned to the sun, every relief carved into alabaster or limestone reinforced the supremacy of light over tradition. The citizens of AKHENTEN, however, began to internalize this new faith. Children played under open skies that funneled the first rays of dawn into courtyards. Farmers and laborers adjusted their work schedules to coincide with the sun's trajectory. Music and dance, once optional forms of devotion, became integral to daily life. The city itself taught the people how to worship. And yet, as Akhenaten's letters reveal, he understood that devotion could be fragile. Human loyalty was as delicate as the papyrus he inscribed. He worried about dissent, about hidden disobedience, and about the ways fear and habit could undermine even the most radiant vision. Art became an essential tool in this revolution. Reliefs depicting Akhenaten and Nefertiti bathed in sunlight presented an image of divine intimacy and human tenderness. Children were shown playing beneath the rays of Aten, the golden disk reaching down like protective arms. Citizens, laborers, and farmers were depicted performing their daily tasks as sacred acts. Every piece of art reinforced the ideology of the king, making the city itself a curriculum of faith, a lesson in devotion enacted by stone, sunlight, and the daily lives of its inhabitants. Akhenaten's letters reflect both his confidence and his caution. Some fragments reveal awe at the beauty and harmony of AKHENTEN. The city rises like a hymn. Each street, each terrace, each beam of sunlight carries the devotion of all who dwell here. Even the smallest act becomes a prayer in the light. Others reveal acute awareness of vulnerability. Yet I fear the shadows of men more than the darkness of night. The old gods linger in hearts and minds, unseen but powerful. Let my vigilance guide them, for the sun alone cannot command obedience. Through these letters, we glimpse a king who understood that faith could not be commanded by decree alone. It must be nurtured, observed, and protected. The construction of AKHENTEN remained a physical manifestation of this ideology. Streets, temples, and altars were meticulously oriented to align with the sun's daily journey. Courtyards were designed to capture the first rays of morning and the last of dusk. Workers, artisans, and citizens participated not only in the practical tasks of building a city, but in the spiritual act of aligning their lives with the divine. The letters recorded these efforts in painstaking detail, guiding the placement of stones, the timing of ceremonies, and the orchestration of festivals. Every structure, every open space, every ceremonial act was a note in the grand symphony of Aten city. Even as AKHENTEN flourished, the old order remained a subtle but persistent threat. Priests of Ammonius preserved rituals in secrecy, nobles expressed quiet resistance, and scribes documented changes with a wary neutrality. Envoys from neighboring kingdoms noted the city's radical departure from tradition and reported with equal parts awe and apprehension. The tension between continuity and innovation, between human authority and divine inspiration, defined the social and political landscape. Akhenaten's letters reveal his constant negotiation with this reality, balancing caution with courage, diplomacy with conviction, and vision with pragmatism. The festivals of Aten offered both spectacle and pedagogy. Citizens, courtiers, and children participated in rituals designed to teach devotion through experience. Music, dance, and poetry became extensions of faith, reinforcing the presence of Aten in daily life. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters acted as exemplars, embodying the ideals of worship and demonstrating the integration of private devotion with public duty. Yet behind the radiant pageantry, letters hidden beneath floors continued to reveal the pharaoh's personal reflections. Fears of failure, anxieties about dissent, and the relentless weight of responsibility. Through these letters, we understand the intimate dimension of Akhenaten's reign. He was not a distant, abstract figure, but a profoundly human ruler, balancing personal devotion with the practicalities of governance. He was aware of the fragility of faith, the complexity of human behavior, and the immense responsibility of reshaping a civilization's spiritual landscape. And in his private words, preserved secretly, we find a king wrestling with doubt, striving for clarity, and seeking to align his own heart with the brilliance of the divine. AKHENTEN, for all its glory, was both triumph and experiment. Streets aligned to the sun, temples open to light, and citizens participating in daily worship created a kingdom that seemed almost otherworldly. Yet the city was vulnerable, reliant on the discipline and belief of its inhabitants, and subject to the persistent tension of tradition versus revolution. Akhenaten's letters reveal the human dimension behind these achievements. A king aware of the delicate balance between inspiration and obedience, vision and reality, devotion and pragmatism. By the time the sun reached its zenith on the day of a great festival, AKHENTEN appeared to be the embodiment of divine order. The city pulsed with sunlight, the citizens performed rituals with synchronized precision, and the royal family stood at the center, arms extended in eternal homage to Aten. Yet even in these moments of triumph, the letters remind us that the pharaoh remained vigilant, acutely conscious of the fragility of both human loyalty and spiritual revolution. In the end, AKHENTEN was more than a city. It was a living testament to the interplay of human ambition, divine inspiration, and the delicate art of belief. Akhenaten's letters preserved in hidden chambers were the invisible heartbeat of this creation, chronicling the pharaoh's devotion, fear, doubt, and vision. They recorded a ruler attempting to reconcile the demands of governance with the imperatives of faith, seeking to illuminate a civilization with light while navigating the shadows of human complexity. And so, the story of AKHENTEN and its king is one of both brilliance and vulnerability, of devotion and defiance, of faith tested by human limitation. The letters that survive beneath floors, in secret drawers, and hidden chambers reveal not only the extraordinary vision of Akhenaten, but the profoundly human struggle to translate divine inspiration into the tangible reality of a city, a kingdom, and a people. The sun, ever constant, watched over it all, bearing witness to the courage, risk, and hope contained within each carefully written line. Through this lens, we see Akhenaten not merely as a ruler or a radical innovator, but as a man grappling with the demands of history, the weight of faith, and the delicate balance of human and divine. And in these letters, preserved and hidden from the eyes of men, lies the most intimate, revealing, and enduring testament of all. The story of a king, his queen, and a city built to honor the light, both seen and unseen. As AKHENTEN settled into its rhythm, the city became a mirror reflecting both the glory and the vulnerability of Akhenaten's vision. Streets laid in perfect alignment with the rising sun glimmered like golden threads across the desert, while open-air temples allowed the light to penetrate spaces once reserved for shadowed rituals. Citizens moved through this environment with an awareness born of necessity and devotion, their daily lives interwoven with the patterns of the sun. Laborers, artisans, and priests all contributed to a choreography that was as much spiritual as practical. A city alive with the pulse of divine light. Akhenaten's letters continued to serve as both guide and confession. Hidden beneath floorboards and tucked into secret chambers, they documented the delicate interplay of faith and governance. One fragment reads, "The city breathes with the light, yet I fear the breath of men. I am alone in the eyes of mortals, but the sun watches all." These words reveal a king who understood that the true challenge of revolution was not merely in constructing temples or decreeing rituals, but in navigating the hearts and minds of those whose allegiance was neither guaranteed nor absolute. The social and political ramifications of AKHENTEN's transformation were profound. Long-standing hierarchies rooted in devotion to multiple gods were disrupted. The priests of Amarna, once central to the rhythm of Egyptian life, found their influence waning. Some attempted subtle acts of resistance, preserving their rituals in secrecy, whispering counsel to those loyal to tradition, or quietly documenting changes for future generations. Others adapted, finding ways to participate in the new system while maintaining fragments of the old. Akhenaten, ever vigilant, understood these undercurrents. His letters reveal meticulous attention to subtle gestures, cautious manipulation of court politics, and the orchestration of public life to reinforce loyalty to Aten. Art and architecture in AKHENTEN reflected the city's ideological transformation. Reliefs depicted the royal family not in distant, godlike abstraction, but in intimate communion with Aten, children playing beneath rays of light, and citizens engaged in acts of daily life elevated to sacred expression. Even the mundane, harvesting crops, carrying water, crafting tools, was rendered holy by association with the sunlight that defined the city. These visual narratives reinforced the king's letters, providing a tangible guide to devotion, a language that taught obedience and faith through observation and imitation. The role of Nefertiti remained crucial in maintaining balance between vision and reality. She guided Akhenaten when doubts arose, interpreted his complex theological musings, and translated divine inspiration into practical governance. Their partnership was emblematic of the human dimension underlying the divine experiment. In private moments, she read and discussed his letters, offering insight, reassurance, and strategy. Together, they navigated both internal tensions and the subtle, simmering opposition of those who resisted the transformation of faith. Their unity was the invisible cornerstone of AKHENTEN, stabilizing the city and its people as the pharaoh's vision took root. The hidden letters themselves were more than instructions. They were confessions, meditations, and philosophies. They reveal Akhenaten's introspection, his fear of failure, and the constant vigilance required to maintain a kingdom founded on a single, unseen God. Let my actions be measured not by the eyes of men, one reads, but by the sun which illuminates all. If I fail, let the city and the people remember that devotion, once lost, can be restored by courage and perseverance. These private writings provide a rare glimpse into the emotional and intellectual life of a pharaoh often remembered only for radical reforms and architectural achievements. The practicalities of governing a city aligned to divine purpose were immense. Streets were carefully oriented to capture the first light of dawn, altars designed to maximize exposure to the sun, and courtyards positioned to serve both ritual and daily life. Citizens were instructed not only in mechanics of labor but in the rhythm of worship, creating an environment where devotion and functionality were inseparable. Laborers and artisans, sometimes unconsciously, became participants in a grand spiritual narrative, their work imbued with meaning beyond its immediate utility. Akhenaten's letters meticulously recorded these efforts, ensuring that the city's alignment to both faith and practicality remained intact. Yet beneath the brilliance, dissent persisted. Some courtiers resisted overtly, attempting to preserve old hierarchies and rituals. Others resisted quietly, maintaining private altars or discreetly observing traditional deities. The priests of Ammonius documented every deviation from orthodoxy, preserving rituals in secret for a future that might restore the old order. Even as AKHENTEN glimmered in sunlight, the tension between revolution and tradition was palpable. Akhenaten's letters reflect acute awareness of these dynamics, demonstrating not only strategic thinking, but also a profound understanding of human behavior, fear, and loyalty. Akhenaten's personal devotion and public governance intertwined seamlessly. The pharaoh's letters reveal that every festival, every ceremony, and every architectural decision was part of a broader strategy to cultivate devotion to Aten. Music, dance, and poetry were not mere entertainment. They were pedagogical tools, instructing citizens in the language of worship. Children were educated through observation, laborers through participation, and nobles through example. In this way, AKHENTEN became both a city and a curriculum, teaching belief through architecture, art, ritual, and daily life. The psychological weight of leadership is evident in the pharaoh's correspondence. Hidden letters express anxiety over the durability of devotion, concern about the subtle sway of human doubt, and acknowledgement of the immense responsibility placed on his shoulders. Yet interwoven with these fears are moments of awe and inspiration. The sight of sunlight reflecting off a terrace, the perfect alignment of an altar, or the synchronized participation of citizens in worship. These letters capture the duality of Akhenaten's reign, brilliance and vulnerability, innovation and caution, divinity, and humanity. Despite these challenges, AKHENTEN continued to thrive. Streets aligned with the sun's trajectory, courtyards designed for maximum illumination, and temples serving both spiritual and civic functions created a city that was both functional and sacred. Citizens adjusted their routines, artisans worked in harmony with the divine rhythm, and festivals integrated music, dance, and poetry to reinforce devotion. In private chambers, Akhenaten's letters continued to document, instruct, and reflect, ensuring that every facet of the city was aligned with the ideological and spiritual revolution he championed. The culmination of these efforts is visible in the grand festivals of AKHENTEN. Citizens, courtiers, and children participated in rituals designed to harmonize the practical and spiritual aspects of life. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters led these ceremonies, embodying devotion, demonstrating ritual, and inspiring participation. Every act, every gesture, every song reinforced the ideology embedded in the city's streets, altars, and temples. Yet, even in these moments of triumph, the hidden letters remind us of the persistent vigilance required to sustain a revolution of faith. AKHENTEN was more than architecture. It was a living testament to Akhenaten's vision, blending human ambition with divine inspiration. Streets, altars, and temples were carefully orchestrated to teach devotion, enforce faith, and reflect a radical departure from tradition. The hidden letters captured the intellectual and emotional depth of the pharaoh, documenting both triumphs and anxieties, successes and fears, strategies and confessions. They reveal a ruler attempting to reconcile personal devotion with governance, private reflection with public action, and human frailty with divine inspiration. By integrating architecture, art, ritual, and letters, Akhenaten created a city that was simultaneously practical, sacred, and profoundly human. Citizens participated in a rhythm dictated by sunlight, labor became an act of devotion, and the royal family embodied the ideals of faith and governance. The letters preserved beneath floors and hidden chambers recorded not only instructions but also the intimate thoughts of a pharaoh who understood the precariousness of belief, the fragility of loyalty, and the necessity of constant vigilance. AKHENTEN, in all its radiance and innovation, was a city of contradictions. Strong yet fragile, magnificent yet vulnerable, revolutionary yet precarious. The letters reveal a king acutely aware of these dynamics, navigating a kingdom transformed by light and devotion while simultaneously contending with the enduring tension of tradition, resistance, and human complexity. Through architecture, ritual, and correspondence, Akhenaten shaped a kingdom not only physically but spiritually, leaving a legacy that would challenge historians and captivate the imagination for millennia. In the end, the story of AKHENTEN, the letters, and the pharaoh himself is one of human courage, vision, and vulnerability. It is a tale of devotion intertwined with innovation, fear mingled with inspiration, and leadership defined not merely by power, but by the ability to reconcile human ambition with divine aspiration. And within the hidden chambers, the letters endure, whispering the story of a king who dared to follow the sun, leaving behind a kingdom built on light, faith, and the indelible mark of human determination. The desert horizon seemed endless, stretching in pale gold and ochre beyond the walls of AKHENTEN. Yet within the city, every stone, courtyard, and altar was meticulously aligned to a precise vision. Akhenaten's letters, secret and scattered, describe the careful orchestration of this urban symphony. He was aware that a city devoted entirely to one god required constant attention, vigilance, and guidance. Every act of labor, every festival, every movement of citizens through streets and temples was part of a spiritual experiment, a living testament to devotion to AKHENTEN, the sun disk whose brilliance illuminated both city and conscience. The letters reveal the intimate anxieties of a ruler redefining faith. Some passages are devotional, expressing awe at the sun's rays illuminating AKHENTEN, transforming mundane stone into sacred light. Others are strategic, detailing the positioning of courtyards to capture dawn's first glow, or specifying that altars be placed at exact angles to maximize exposure to sunlight. Yet within these meticulous instructions, there are confessions, fear of dissent, concern for human frailty, and the realization that obedience and belief cannot be enforced by stone alone. Akhenaten understood that faith was delicate, and that its cultivation required patience, charisma, and the subtle orchestration of human behavior. The priesthood of Ammonius, marginalized and increasingly desperate, attempted to navigate these changes. Some acted with cunning, spreading doubt among citizens and court officials, while others focused on preserving sacred knowledge for a time when tradition might reclaim dominance. They documented alterations in rituals, temple closures, and artistic innovations with precision, understanding that history would remember both their loyalty and their resistance. Their efforts, though hidden from public view, created a silent countercurrent to the pharaoh's transformative vision, a shadow beneath the brilliance of sunlight that filled the city. AKHENTEN itself became an instrument of ideology. Streets, terraces, and open courtyards were designed not only for function but for spiritual immersion. Citizens participated in rituals woven seamlessly into daily life, unaware that their labor was both civic and sacred. Music, dance, and poetry punctuated work and celebration, creating patterns of devotion that aligned citizens' minds with the rhythm of the sun. In his letters, Akhenaten instructs his officials on subtle matters of ceremony, ensuring that public displays of worship reinforced personal faith, and that the city itself embodied the teachings of Aten in both visible and invisible ways. Nefertiti's role in maintaining this balance was crucial. She acted as advisor, confidant, and interpreter, translating the king's theological musings into practical governance. Letters preserved in secret reveal her influence in decision-making, in the orchestration of festivals, and in the management of dissent. She recognized the emotional weight of transformation on both ruler and ruled, and her guidance ensured that the city maintained cohesion while adhering to its revolutionary ideals. Together, she and Akhenaten formed a partnership that intertwined human empathy with divine aspiration, creating a leadership structure that was as much spiritual as political. The construction of AKHENTEN was relentless. Streets were aligned with precision to the trajectory of the sun, terraces designed to catch light at specific hours, and altars positioned to draw the gaze upward toward the divine disk. Laborers, artisans, and citizens were not merely workers. They were participants in an unfolding ritual of creation. Every act, from laying stones to painting reliefs, became an expression of devotion. Akhenaten's letters document this work in exhaustive detail, recording angles, dimensions, and ceremonial timing, ensuring that every element of the city reflected both practical utility and spiritual purpose. Artistic innovation flourished alongside urban design. Reliefs depicted the royal family bathed in sunlight, engaged in intimate moments that symbolized both human tenderness and divine communion. Children played under rays of the sun, citizens labored and worshipped, and the king himself was shown as both a sovereign and a servant of the divine. These representations were intentional, providing both guidance and inspiration, teaching the populace the values and behaviors necessary for devotion. The letters, hidden and private, instructed artists on subtle nuances of gesture, light, and proportion, demonstrating the pharaoh's understanding that faith could be cultivated visually as well as ritually. Yet even in triumph, tension simmered. Some courtiers and officials resisted subtly, preserving old rituals, maintaining private altars, or quietly observing traditional deities. The priesthood of Ammonius, though sidelined, carefully documented the transformations of AKHENTEN, preserving knowledge that might one day restore their influence. Akhenaten, aware of this undercurrent, used both public display and private instruction to reinforce loyalty. His letters detail strategic interventions, subtle persuasion, and personal reflection, revealing a ruler who balanced confidence in his vision with acute awareness of human complexity. The festivals of Aten were central to consolidating faith. Citizens, artisans, and laborers participated in ritual performances that synchronized work, worship, and art. Music and dance transformed ordinary streets into stages for divine celebration. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters acted as exemplars, guiding the population through ceremonies that blended spectacle and spiritual instruction. Letters reveal the king's attention to detail in timing, choreography, and participation, demonstrating his belief that faith was not only taught but enacted. Every festival was a living lesson, every ritual an opportunity to align human action with divine order. Akhenaten's personal correspondence provides insight into his inner life. He wrestled with fear and doubt, acknowledging the precariousness of human devotion, yet remained resolute in his mission. One letter reads, "The city shines, yet shadows linger. The hearts of men are delicate. The obedience of the soul cannot be commanded as stone is laid. Let the sun guide them, and let my vigilance never waver." Through these words, we glimpse a ruler both inspired and burdened, a man acutely aware of the responsibilities of faith and leadership. His letters reveal a deeply human pharaoh, capable of both radical vision and intimate reflection. The architecture of Akhenaten became a teaching tool. Streets, terraces, and altars were carefully arranged to instruct citizens in the principles of devotion. Courtyards captured the movement of sunlight, open-air temples invited communal participation, and reliefs depicted moral and spiritual lessons. Every element of the city reflected the integration of faith, governance, and human behavior. Akhenaten's letters served as an invisible scaffold, guiding officials and citizens alike in aligning their lives with the divine rhythm, ensuring that devotion remained active, visible, and internalized. Even as Akhenaten thrived, the challenge of dissent persisted. The priesthood of Ammonius maintained secret rituals, courtiers preserved traditions in private, and citizens occasionally questioned the abrupt departure from familiar practices. Letters reveal that Akhenaten understood the fragility of belief and the necessity of vigilance. He combined architectural innovation, public spectacle, personal charisma, and written guidance to maintain cohesion, demonstrating a sophisticated grasp of both human psychology and spiritual pedagogy. The city's brilliance, he knew, depended not only on sunlight but on sustained human engagement. The integration of art, ritual, and urban planning created a city that was simultaneously sacred and functional, revolutionary and fragile. Akhenaten's letters reveal a ruler orchestrating multiple layers of devotion. The visible, enacted through festivals and public ceremonies. The structural, embedded in the city itself. And the hidden, preserved in private writings that guided governance and faith. These letters document a continuous effort to reconcile human limitation with divine aspiration, ensuring that Akhenaten remained a living testament to both innovation and spiritual commitment. Ultimately, Akhenaten was more than a city. It was a manifestation of Akhenaten's vision, preserved in stone, sun, and secret correspondence. Citizens participated in faith both actively and passively, learning devotion through labor, art, and ritual. Nefertiti and the royal family acted as living symbols of the new order. Priests of the old gods persisted in secrecy, creating a subtle tension that kept the city dynamic and alive. And the letters, hidden beneath floors and within chambers, continued to record, instruct, and reflect, offering a unique glimpse into the heart and mind of a pharaoh who dared to reorder the universe according to light. Through architecture, ritual, and correspondence, Akhenaten reshaped Egypt's spiritual and civic landscape. Akhenaten stands as a testament to human ingenuity, devotion, and the courage to challenge tradition. The letters, preserved but hidden, reveal the deeply human struggle behind this transformation. A pharaoh negotiating fear, loyalty, faith, and innovation, leaving a legacy that would echo through history. In the interplay of sunlight and shadow, of stone and script, we glimpse the fragile yet enduring brilliance of a city built on vision, faith, and the unyielding pursuit of divine alignment. The sun rose over Akhenaten with a brilliance that seemed almost unnatural, flooding the streets, terraces, and temples with golden light. Every corner of the city had been meticulously designed to interact with the sun's journey, creating an environment in which devotion and daily life were inseparable. Citizens awoke not only to the rhythm of work but to the rhythm of worship, participating in an intricate choreography that reflected Akhenaten's revolutionary vision. Every laborer, artisan, and priest moved with purpose, aware, consciously or not, that their actions were both practical and sacred. Akhenaten's letters from this period reveal an acute awareness of the delicate balance required to maintain faith. Hidden beneath palace floors and tucked into secret chambers, they detail both strategy and confession. One fragment reads, "The city breathes in light, yet I feel the weight of hearts unlit. Obedience cannot be forced. Devotion must be nurtured. Let the sun guide them, and let my vigilance remain unwavering." These writings show a king deeply engaged with the psychological and spiritual dimensions of leadership, aware that the success of Akhenaten depended not only on architecture or ritual, but on the hearts of the people who inhabited it. The urban planning of Akhenaten was revolutionary. Streets aligned with precise solar angles, terraces capturing the first and last rays of the day, and temples arranged to maximize illumination all served to create a living classroom of faith. Citizens moved through spaces that taught devotion by example. The placement of altars, courtyards, and public gathering spaces ensured that the light of Aten touched every aspect of life, from the mundane to the ceremonial. Akhenaten's letters provide meticulous instructions for these arrangements, emphasizing that alignment with the divine was both spiritual and practical. Art became a critical tool in shaping perception and belief. Reliefs depicted the royal family in intimate communion with Aten, children playing beneath the sun, and citizens engaged in labor elevated to sacred acts. Every carving, every painted surface, was designed to instruct and inspire. Akhenaten's letters reveal that he personally supervised these details, specifying gestures, expressions, and the interplay of light and shadow. Through this art, the pharaoh sought to create a society in which devotion was internalized, visible in action, and reinforced by everyday observation. The priesthood of Ammonius and other traditional religious authorities faced unprecedented challenges. Once central to Egyptian spiritual life, they now found themselves marginalized, their temples repurposed, and their rituals suppressed. Some priests attempted covert resistance, preserving sacred knowledge, quietly influencing citizens, and maintaining private altars. Others adapted, seeking ways to align with the new order while retaining fragments of the old faith. The letters describe Akhenaten's awareness of this silent opposition, his concern for loyalty, and his strategies for ensuring that public devotion to Aten was comprehensive and enduring. Nefertiti's role continued to be indispensable. She interpreted Akhenaten's theological musings into actionable governance, advised on court matters, and provided emotional support as the pharaoh navigated the immense pressures of leadership. Letters suggest that she helped balance the spiritual and political dimensions of Akhenaten, guiding the king through moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Their partnership was a blend of intellect, devotion, and personal understanding, creating a foundation upon which the city, its rituals, and its citizens could thrive amid the constant tension of revolution and resistance. The letters also reveal Akhenaten's personal reflections, showing a king deeply human despite his divine mission. He confesses fear of dissent, anxiety about the fragility of human devotion, and the burden of transforming centuries of tradition. Yet he also writes with inspiration and determination. "If the hearts of men falter, let the sun guide them. If the city wavers, let my hands steady it. I am both servant and sovereign, and my task is illuminated by light unseen by any other." These writings underscore the pharaoh's dual consciousness, ruler of a kingdom and servant of a god, mediator between human limitation and divine aspiration. The festivals of Aten, as recorded in letters and archaeological evidence, became both educational and performative. Citizens, courtiers, and children participated in ceremonies where labor, ritual, and celebration intertwined. Music, dance, and poetry transformed public spaces into arenas of spiritual instruction. The king and queen served as living exemplars, modeling the ideals of worship, behavior, and devotion. Every act, gesture, and arrangement was a lesson in faith, demonstrating the pharaoh's understanding that belief could be taught, reinforced, and enacted simultaneously. Akhenaten's daily life was inseparable from spiritual practice. Laborers adjusted their routines to align with the sun's path, artisans created works that served both function and devotion, and citizens' interactions with public spaces were choreographed by architecture designed to foster awareness of the divine. In his letters, Akhenaten detailed the precise timing of activities, ensuring that sunlight and human action were in harmony. Through this meticulous orchestration, the city became a living embodiment of ideology, where every individual's movements contributed to the rhythm of faith. Resistance persisted, however. Courtiers, nobles, and some citizens continued to observe traditional deities in secrecy, maintaining private rituals and hidden altars. The letters show that Akhenaten recognized the need for careful monitoring and subtle intervention. He instructed officials to observe participation, correct deviations, and encourage the adoption of Aten's worship without provoking overt rebellion. The king's attention to these human details demonstrates his awareness that revolution required both monumental vision and nuanced management of human behavior. The integration of architecture, art, and ritual made AKHENTEN an immersive environment. Streets, temples, and terraces were tools of education, instruction, and devotion. Every design choice, from the placement of altars to the alignment of buildings, reinforced spiritual principles. Letters preserved beneath palace floors offer insight into the pharaoh's strategic thinking, revealing a ruler who understood that faith could not be decreed, but had to be cultivated through experience, observation, and subtle guidance. The personal dimension of Akhenaten's correspondence is striking. Hidden letters express doubt, fear, and vulnerability alongside inspiration, conviction, and strategic planning. One fragment reads, "I walk among men, yet I see only the sun. Let my hands shape the city, my words guide the faithful, and my vigilance maintain devotion. If I fail, let the light itself bear witness." These writings humanize a pharaoh often remembered only for his architectural and religious innovations, revealing a leader who was acutely aware of the emotional and practical challenges of reshaping a civilization. The city itself became a canvas for the pharaoh's vision. Reliefs depicted the royal family in acts of worship, citizens engaged in labor rendered sacred, and children participating in sunlight-filled rituals. Every element was both symbolic and instructional, teaching citizens the values, behaviors, and devotion necessary for the survival of the new faith. Akhenaten's letters, hidden from public view, guided this process, ensuring that ideology, ritual, and daily life remained in precise alignment. Even amid triumph, the delicate nature of human belief weighed heavily on the king. The letters reveal his constant vigilance, concern for dissent, and understanding of the fragility of loyalty. He combined public spectacle, architectural brilliance, and personal guidance to cultivate and maintain faith, demonstrating a sophisticated grasp of leadership, psychology, and spirituality. The city of AKHENTEN, radiant in sunlight and meticulously organized, became a living testament to this philosophy. Ultimately, the letters of Akhenaten provide an unparalleled glimpse into the mind of a pharaoh who dared to challenge centuries of tradition. They reveal not only his devotion to Aten but his understanding of human behavior, governance, and the intricacies of cultivating belief. Through architecture, ritual, and hidden correspondence, he reshaped a civilization, leaving behind a city that reflected both divine aspiration and human ambition. AKHENTEN was a city of light, letters, and living faith, an enduring monument to one ruler's extraordinary vision. The golden light of the sun poured over AKHENTEN, as if the heavens themselves were endorsing Akhenaten's vision. Streets glimmered with reflected sunlight, temples radiated brilliance, and every relief seemed to capture the essence of devotion in motion. Yet beneath this luminous perfection, the city was alive with subtle tension. Citizens moved through the meticulously planned streets, artisans labored on sacred reliefs, and priests guided rituals, all under the watchful eye of a pharaoh whose personal devotion and meticulous planning made every action a spiritual act. The city was not merely a political center. It was a living classroom for faith, a laboratory for devotion, and a stage upon which the drama of revolution played out daily. Akhenaten's letters, hidden in secret chambers beneath the palace floors, reveal the full scope of his anxieties and ambitions. Some passages are theological, reflecting his awe at the brilliance of Aten and the transformative power of light. Others are intensely personal, capturing his worries about dissent, the fragility of human loyalty, and the responsibility of leading a society in the midst of a spiritual revolution. One fragment reads, "Even as the city shines in the light, shadows of doubt linger in the hearts of men. I must guide them, for the sun sees what they conceal." These writings remind us that beneath the apparent radiance of Akhenaten was a pharaoh acutely aware of the complexities of human nature. Nefertiti continued to serve as both companion and counsel, her influence shaping decisions that extended from domestic governance to the orchestration of the city's spiritual life. Letters indicate that she played a crucial role in mediating between Akhenaten's divine vision and the practical realities of ruling a city newly devoted to a single god. She interpreted his theological musings, offered guidance on ritual and festival management, and helped maintain the delicate balance between innovation and stability. Their partnership was a fusion of intellect, devotion, and emotional intelligence, creating the foundation necessary to sustain a radical vision amidst persistent tension. The urban planning of Akhenaten exemplified the integration of faith and daily life. Streets were aligned with precise solar trajectories, terraces and courtyards positioned to capture the first and last rays of the sun, and altars placed to maximize exposure. Citizens were subtly taught devotion through their interaction with the city itself. Laborers and artisans engaged in acts that were both functional and sacred, while courtiers and officials observed the evolving patterns of faith. Akhenaten's letters detail these arrangements in meticulous detail, demonstrating the pharaoh's understanding that devotion could be cultivated not only through ritual, but through the careful orchestration of space, architecture, and movement. Artistic expression was central to this strategy. Reliefs depicted the royal family in intimate communion with Aten, children playing beneath rays of sunlight, and citizens performing labor that was elevated to spiritual significance. Every brushstroke and chisel mark was part of an instruction manual for devotion, teaching behavior, loyalty, and reverence. Akhenaten's letters guide the creation of these works, specifying nuances of gesture, proportion, and interaction with light. In this way, art became a vehicle for ideological transmission, allowing belief to be encoded visually and experienced daily by every inhabitant of Akhenaten. Despite the brilliance of the city, dissent persisted. Priests of Ammonius and other traditional deities quietly maintained rituals in secrecy, nobles and courtiers resisted subtly, and some citizens clung to old forms of worship. Akhenaten recognized the fragility of loyalty and the difficulty of reshaping centuries of religious tradition. His letters reveal a ruler constantly engaged in monitoring participation, addressing subtle deviations, and guiding public and private behavior to reinforce devotion to Aten. In doing so, he demonstrated both a profound understanding of human psychology and a remarkable capacity for foresight and strategic planning. The festivals of Aten were orchestrated as both spectacle and pedagogy. Citizens, artisans, and children participated in ceremonies designed to synchronize labor, worship, and artistic expression. Music, dance, and poetry transformed the city into a stage where devotion was enacted daily. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters served as exemplars, guiding behavior, modeling rituals, and inspiring active participation. Every gesture, arrangement, and performance was a lesson in faith, demonstrating that true devotion was not passive but active, embodied in the very rhythm of life within the city. Akhenaten's letters also illuminate the pharaoh's private reflections and fears. He acknowledges the precarious nature of human belief and the necessity of vigilance, yet expresses profound awe at the success of his vision. One letter reads, "The city thrives under the light, yet the hearts of men remain delicate. If I falter, devotion may waver. Let the sun guide them, and may my vigilance never wane." These writings humanize a ruler often remembered solely for his architectural and religious innovations, revealing a man deeply conscious of the stakes of leadership, the fragility of faith, and the responsibilities of creating a city devoted entirely to a singular divine presence. The city itself became a teacher. Streets, temples, terraces, and altars were arranged to instruct citizens through experience. Every physical feature was aligned to the movement of the sun, creating lessons in devotion embedded in daily life. Akhenaten's letters provide instructions to officials, detailing precise measurements, timing, and ceremonial coordination, ensuring that human behavior, urban design, and ritual remained in harmonious alignment. Citizens unknowingly internalized these lessons, moving through a city designed to shape both belief and action. The tension between innovation and tradition remained ever-present. Hidden altars, private rituals, and the silent documentation of the old priesthood created a subtle undercurrent of resistance. Akhenaten's letters demonstrate his awareness of these pressures, detailing interventions, encouragement, and oversight designed to preserve the integrity of his vision. The city, brilliant in sunlight and architectural precision, was both fragile and resilient, a testament to the careful orchestration of human, spiritual, and environmental elements. Art, architecture, and ritual fused to create a living ideological ecosystem. Reliefs depicting the royal family, citizens, and children in acts of devotion reinforced the lessons embedded in urban planning. Festivals and ceremonies synchronized movement, labor, and worship, creating a continuous feedback loop of instruction and participation. Akhenaten's letters document every nuance of this system, revealing a ruler deeply engaged with the practical and spiritual dimensions of leadership. His writings ensure that the city remained not only functional but sacred, not only aesthetically magnificent but ideologically coherent. Even in moments of triumph, Akhenaten remained vigilant. Hidden letters express concern for dissent, anxiety about loyalty, and awareness of human imperfection. He understood that faith, like the alignment of a temple or street, could not be assumed but required constant cultivation. Through public spectacle, private guidance, and architectural genius, he sought to stabilize devotion, transform belief, and embed the worship of Aten into the very fabric of daily life. AKHENTEN became a city of contradictions. Radiant yet fragile, revolutionary yet precarious, magnificent yet dependent on constant oversight. The letters provide insight into a ruler who balanced confidence with caution, inspiration with strategy, and divine aspiration with human understanding. Architecture, ritual, and art all served as instruments of faith, but the letters reveal the unseen human element, the constant labor of guidance, persuasion, and vigilance that made the experiment of AKHENTEN possible. Ultimately, Akhenaten's correspondence offers a rare glimpse into the psyche of a ruler who sought to reshape an entire civilization. He was not only a visionary but a deeply human king, conscious of fear, loyalty, devotion, and vulnerability. Through letters, architecture, and ritual, he forged a city that taught belief as much as it housed citizens, embedding devotion in the patterns of daily life and the brilliance of sunlight. AKHENTEN became a living testament to the fusion of human ambition, divine inspiration, and meticulous strategy. And so, the city stands as a reflection of its creator. A pharaoh both human and godlike, guided by light, sustained by vigilance, and forever conscious of the delicate balance between human frailty and divine aspiration. The letters preserved in secret chambers, carefully hidden beneath floors and walls, continue to speak across millennia, revealing the mind, heart, and soul of a ruler who dared to reshape the spiritual and civic world of Egypt in ways that resonate long after the sun has set on AKHENTEN. The sun's journey across the sky cast long shadows over AKHENTEN, illuminating the city's precise terraces, open courtyards, and temples designed to capture every possible ray of Aten. Each street, each stone, and each altar was placed with deliberate intention, a reflection of Akhenaten's singular vision for a kingdom devoted entirely to the sun. Yet beneath the brilliance of gold and sunlight, the city hummed with tension. Citizens moved in carefully observed patterns. Laborers performed tasks that were both mundane and sacred, and priests guided rituals whose significance extended far beyond mere ceremony. The city was both spectacle and laboratory, a space where the ideals of faith were constantly tested against the complexities of human behavior. Akhenaten's letters, preserved in hidden chambers beneath the palace, reveal his inner thoughts with remarkable clarity. They speak of awe at the way sunlight transforms ordinary stone into sacred space. Yet they also confess fears of dissent and the fragility of human devotion. One passage reads, The city breathes in light, yet I sense shadows in the hearts of men. I am a servant of the sun, yet I must also guide the flawed children of mortals. Through these words, we see a pharaoh acutely aware that the survival of his revolutionary vision depended as much on psychology and governance as on architecture and ritual. The royal family's presence was central to the city's cohesion. Nefertiti, queen and partner in this extraordinary experiment, offered counsel that bridged divine inspiration and practical governance. Letters suggest that she guided the king through moments of doubt, helped coordinate public ceremonies, and maintained the delicate balance between innovation and stability. Together, Akhenaten and Nefertiti embodied the ideals of Aten worship, setting a human example for devotion and moral conduct. Their daughters, too, participated in ritual life, reinforcing the idea that piety was both familial and civic, a lesson taught through example as much as instruction. Akhenaten's urban design reinforced this vision. Streets were aligned to the sun's trajectory, courtyards positioned to capture dawn and dusk, and temples constructed to maximize illumination. Citizens encountered these features daily, integrating their routines into the rhythm of sunlight and worship. Akhenaten's letters provide detailed instructions for timing labor, organizing festivals, and coordinating ceremonies, ensuring that life in the city was synchronized with spiritual principles. In effect, the city itself became a curriculum for devotion, teaching lessons in faith through both experience and environment. Art played a crucial role in shaping belief. Reliefs depicted the royal family, children, and citizens engaged in acts of devotion, their every gesture and expression carefully orchestrated to inspire faith. Akhenaten's letters reveal his direct involvement, specifying details of posture, proportion, and interaction with sunlight. These works were more than decoration. They were visual sermons, teaching obedience, piety, and reverence to all who observed them. In this way, art and architecture worked together to create an immersive ideological environment that both guided and reinforced devotion. The tension with traditional religious authorities continued. Priests of Ammonius, once central to Egyptian spiritual life, quietly preserved rituals, recorded ceremonies, and maintained private worship, hoping for a day when the old gods might regain prominence. Nobles and courtiers similarly retained allegiance to long-standing practices in subtle ways. Akhenaten's letters reflect his awareness of this quiet resistance, documenting measures to monitor participation, correct deviations, and encourage citizens toward the worship of Aten. His vigilance underscores the reality that even a city built to embody divine principles is always subject to the complexities of human behavior. Festivals of Aten were central to consolidating faith in the city. They transformed everyday life into theater, integrating music, dance, poetry, and labor into coordinated rituals that reinforced devotion. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters acted as living exemplars, modeling behavior, demonstrating ritual, and inspiring active participation. The letters reveal the king's meticulous attention to detail, specifying the order of events, timing of performances, and positioning of participants to ensure maximum impact. Each festival was a lesson in devotion, a convergence of spectacle, pedagogy, and communal participation. Daily life in Akhenaten was inseparable from spiritual practice. Laborers synchronized work with the sun's movement, artisans produced works that were both functional and sacred, and citizens' routines reinforced the rhythms of worship. Letters detail these practices, providing instructions for work schedules, ceremonial timing, and civic participation. Through these measures, Akhenaten ensured that human activity was harmonized with divine order, embedding faith into the very fabric of daily existence. Yet, even amid the apparent perfection of sunlight and ceremony, the pharaoh remained vigilant. Hidden letters express fear of disloyalty, concern over private worship of old gods, and anxiety about the human tendency toward complacency. One fragment reads, "The city shines, but the hearts of men are not fully illuminated. I must guide them, for light alone cannot command devotion." These insights reveal a ruler conscious of the limits of architecture and ritual, recognizing that faith required continuous guidance, reinforcement, and human engagement. AKHENTEN's streets and structures functioned as tools of spiritual education. Altars, temples, and courtyards were intentionally designed to teach lessons of devotion, both publicly and privately. The letters specify measurements, angles, and positions that align citizens' physical movement with the solar path, turning the city into an interactive classroom of faith. Citizens internalized these lessons through participation, observation, and ritual, learning devotion not through decree alone, but through lived experience. Resistance persisted, quietly but persistently. Hidden altars, secret rituals, and preserved records of the old faith underscored the fragility of Akhenaten's revolutionary vision. The letters show his strategic approach to managing dissent, combining public spectacle with private intervention, persuasion with instruction. Through vigilance, he sought to maintain alignment between ideology, ritual, and human behavior, aware that the city's brilliance depended as much on human compliance as architectural precision. The integration of art, ritual, and urban planning created a city that was immersive, functional, and sacred. Reliefs depicted devotion, festivals synchronized labor and worship, and architecture reinforced principles of alignment and faith. Akhenaten's letters provided the unseen scaffolding, guiding actions, monitoring participation, and instructing officials. This fusion of human, divine, and environmental elements demonstrates the sophistication of his approach, ensuring that devotion remained both visible and internalized. Even in moments of triumph, Akhenaten's correspondence reflects constant vigilance. The letters convey concern for dissent, awareness of human imperfection, and recognition that faith requires continual cultivation. Public spectacle, architectural brilliance, and personal guidance were tools used to sustain belief and obedience. AKHENTEN, radiant in sunlight, functioned as a living testament to this philosophy, its success dependent on careful orchestration of both material and human resources. Ultimately, the letters of Akhenaten offer an intimate view of a ruler attempting to reshape a civilization. He was visionary yet human, conscious of fear, loyalty, devotion, and vulnerability. Through correspondence, architecture, and ritual, he sought to transform daily life into a spiritual journey, embedding faith in the patterns of work, play, and worship. AKHENTEN stood as a monument to his ambition, ingenuity, and the complex interplay of divine inspiration and human governance. The city was, in essence, an experiment in faith made tangible. Streets, terraces, altars, and temples were not merely functional but instructional, designed to align citizens' lives with divine principles. Festivals, art, and ritual reinforced lessons encoded in urban design. Akhenaten's letters, hidden from public view, chronicled this ongoing process, providing a window into the mind of a pharaoh orchestrating the delicate balance between human fallibility and divine aspiration. In this fusion of light, architecture, ritual, and correspondence, we glimpse the brilliance and vulnerability of Akhenaten's reign. AKHENTEN was both triumph and test, a city illuminated by sunlight and guided by the unseen words of its ruler. The letters preserved beneath floors and walls remain as a testament to the intellectual, spiritual, and emotional labor required to sustain a city devoted entirely to a single god. In the interplay of sun and shadow, stone and script, human ambition and divine inspiration, the legacy of Akhenaten endures, echoing across millennia. The city of AKHENTEN glimmered under the morning sun, its terraces, temples, and streets meticulously aligned to honor Aten. Akhenaten's letters from this period reveal a ruler intensely aware of the fragility of faith. The sun rises, yet I see hearts that may wander. My guidance must illuminate more than stone. It must reach the spirit. He understood that belief could not be enforced, only nurtured through ritual, example, and vigilance. Nefertiti played a central role in sustaining this vision. She oversaw festivals, mediated disputes, and instructed the royal daughters in both civic and spiritual responsibilities. Together, their leadership turned the city into a living organism where art, architecture, and ritual were inseparable from daily life. Streets, courtyards, and temples were not mere structures. They were instruments to guide devotion, rhythm, and behavior. Reliefs and statues reinforced theological principles, teaching citizens visually as well as ritually. Yet resistance simmered beneath the city's brilliance. Priests of Ammonius conducted private rituals, and nobles secretly adhered to traditional gods. Akhenaten's letters reveal strategies for subtle correction. Observation, reinforcement of public worship, and careful guidance to maintain ideological unity. Festivals, music, and dance strengthened cohesion, providing immersive experiences where instruction and inspiration intertwined. AKHENTENN functioned as a living laboratory of faith. Every routine, from labor to ceremony, contributed to the city's spiritual coherence. Letters preserved beneath palace floors show a ruler balancing ambition with pragmatism, brilliance with vigilance, and vision with human imperfection. Akhenaten's legacy endures not only in stone and art, but in these intimate writings, offering insight into the mind of a pharaoh determined to reshape civilization through devotion and guidance. As sunlight streamed across AKHENTENN, the city radiated brilliance, yet shadows hinted at unseen resistance. Akhenaten's letters from this period reveal his awareness of human fragility. Even in the light, hearts may falter. Devotion must be nurtured, guided, and sustained, lest the city lose its purpose. Faith was fragile, requiring constant vigilance, careful planning, and personal example. Nefertiti's influence remained indispensable. She ensured the seamless execution of festivals, rituals, and civic duties while guiding the royal daughters as living symbols of devotion. Together, the royal family maintained the city's ideological coherence, embedding faith into both the grand structures and the daily rhythms of life. Streets, temples, and courtyards acted as teachers, while reliefs and statues communicated theological lessons through visual language. Even as public adherence to Aten worship appeared strong, hidden resistance persisted. Secret altars, private rituals, and clandestine devotion to traditional gods reminded Akhenaten that vigilance was essential. Letters reveal subtle strategies: observation, correction, and reinforcement of public ceremonies to maintain unity. Daily routines, synchronized with sunlight and ritual, reinforced faith, embedding belief into labor, civic participation, and communal life. Festivals, music, and ritual provided cohesion. Letters meticulously detail timing, choreography, and spatial arrangements, ensuring citizens experienced both instruction and inspiration. AKHENTENN became a living stage where devotion was performed, observed, and internalized. Ultimately, AKHENTENN functioned as a city of light and shadow, where human hearts, ritual, and architectural design intertwined. Letters preserved from this period reveal Akhenaten's careful orchestration of faith, reflecting a ruler balancing vision, human imperfection, and the constant challenge of sustaining belief. His legacy endures in stone, ritual, and correspondence, offering a glimpse into the audacity and complexity of his revolutionary experiment. The afternoon sun cast a molten glow across AKHENTENN, painting every terrace, temple, and street with a light that seemed almost alive. The city shimmered, not only with gold and sandstone but with the weight of a vision realized. A vision of devotion, order, and divine alignment orchestrated by Akhenaten himself. Yet beneath the brilliance, the pharaoh's letters reveal a tension that never fully dissipated. The delicate balance between the perfection of his city and the imperfection of human hearts. Every gesture, every ritual, and every festival had to contend with the unpredictable currents of loyalty, doubt, and desire that flowed silently beneath the surface. Akhenaten's correspondence during this period reflects both confidence and caution. One letter reads, "The city thrives under the sun, yet I sense the shadows that linger unseen. I am king and servant, architect and guardian of faith. Every heart must choose the light, yet I must guide them gently, lest the balance falter." These words reveal a ruler intimately aware of the human element in his grand experiment. AKHENTENN, as magnificent as it appeared, was not immune to the subtleties of doubt and resistance, and Akhenaten understood that the success of his vision depended as much on the loyalty of his citizens as on the radiance of the sun. The royal family continued to embody the ideals of Aten worship, but their daily actions carried both symbolic and practical weight. Nefertiti, ever present at the center of court life, advised, mediated, and interpreted Akhenaten's theological reflections into actionable strategies. Their daughters participated in ceremonial duties, modeling devotion and reinforcing the integration of family life with religious practice. Letters indicate that Akhenaten valued this visible embodiment of faith highly, understanding that the public's perception of the royal family directly influenced the fidelity and behavior of the citizenry. The city's design remained central to maintaining alignment between faith and daily life. Streets, temples, and terraces were positioned to maximize the effects of sunlight, ensuring that every citizen experienced the presence of Aten throughout the day. Laborers, artisans, and citizens unknowingly participated in a carefully orchestrated choreography, their movements and tasks embedded with spiritual significance. Akhenaten's letters provide detailed instructions for timing work, coordinating rituals, and structuring festivals, revealing a ruler deeply conscious of the power of environment to shape belief. Art and iconography reinforced this alignment. Reliefs depicted the royal family, children, and citizens engaged in sacred acts, with gestures and expressions designed to instruct as much as to inspire. Akhenaten personally oversaw these creations, specifying minute details of posture, interaction with sunlight, and symbolic meaning. Letters reveal that every work of art was intended as both aesthetic marvel and ideological tool, embedding theological principles in the visual consciousness of the city's inhabitants. In this way, AKHENTEN became a living gallery of devotion, where human action and artistic expression merged to sustain the pharaoh's vision. Resistance to Akhenaten's reforms persisted in subtle but persistent forms. Priests of Ammonius maintained private rituals and secret altars, preserving fragments of the old faith. Some nobles adhered to traditional practices quietly, creating an undercurrent of tension that threatened to undermine the pharaoh's carefully orchestrated order. Letters reveal Akhenaten's strategies for addressing these hidden challenges, observing participation, subtly encouraging conformity, and intervening with precision to prevent dissent from spreading. The pharaoh's vigilance demonstrates an acute understanding of human behavior and the delicate balance required to sustain a revolutionary faith. Festivals served as both spectacle and education. Music, dance, and poetry were synchronized with labor and ritual to create immersive experiences in which devotion was actively taught and reinforced. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters were not merely participants but exemplars, modeling devotion and inspiring public emulation. Letters indicate that the pharaoh oversaw the choreography of these festivals in meticulous detail, specifying order, timing, and positioning to maximize spiritual impact. Through these celebrations, AKHENTEN became a stage for the enactment and reinforcement of faith, a theater in which citizens performed their devotion daily. Daily routines reflected the integration of spiritual and civic life. Laborers coordinated work with sunlight, artisans created sacred objects, and citizens participated in rituals embedded in the rhythm of the city. Letters show Akhenaten's attention to detail in organizing these routines, emphasizing the alignment of human action with cosmic order. In AKHENTEN, the ordinary was infused with the sacred, and every movement, task, or gesture contributed to the ongoing cultivation of loyalty, devotion, and spiritual awareness. The personal tone of Akhenaten's letters highlights the emotional dimension of his rule. One passage reads, "I walk among my people, yet I see only the light. Let my guidance shape their hearts, for devotion cannot be compelled, only inspired. Shadows may linger, but the sun will reveal all." These writings underscore the pharaoh's consciousness of human imperfection and his understanding that leadership required a delicate blend of inspiration, observation, and subtle correction. Faith, he recognized, was not simply a decree but an ongoing, interactive process between ruler, citizen, and deity. The architecture of AKHENTEN functioned as both practical and ideological instrument. Temples, altars, and courtyards were carefully arranged to teach devotion, with precise measurements and alignments reinforcing theological principles. Letters provide detailed instructions for spatial organization, timing of rituals, and the integration of public and private spaces. Inhabitants internalized these lessons through lived experience, making the city itself a curriculum of faith in which architecture, labor, and ritual worked together to reinforce loyalty and belief. Even as the city thrived, hidden resistance persisted. Secret altars, private worship of traditional gods, and subtle acts of dissent created a persistent tension. Akhenaten's letters demonstrate a strategic approach to managing this opposition. Discreet oversight, gentle encouragement, and careful orchestration of public ritual and spectacle to reinforce compliance. The pharaoh's ability to navigate these undercurrents reflects his awareness of the fragility of human devotion and the complexity of transforming centuries of tradition. The integration of art, ritual, and urban design created a cohesive ideological environment. Reliefs instructed citizens, festivals synchronized labor and worship, and city planning embedded principles of faith into daily life. Akhenaten's letters provided the framework for this system, guiding officials, directing ceremonial practice, and ensuring that participation remained consistent. In this way, AKHENTENN functioned as a living, interconnected organism in which human behavior, divine aspiration, and environmental design were inseparable. Even amid apparent success, Akhenaten maintained vigilance. Letters convey concern for disloyalty, recognition of human imperfection, and understanding that devotion required constant reinforcement. Public ceremonies, architectural precision, and private guidance were combined to maintain alignment between ideology and action. The city's brilliance and cohesion depended not only on the skill of architects and artisans, but on the continuous oversight of a ruler deeply attuned to the subtleties of human behavior. Ultimately, Akhenaten's letters provide an intimate view into the mind of a ruler attempting to reshape civilization. He was visionary yet human, aware of fear, loyalty, devotion, and vulnerability. Through correspondence, architecture, art, and ritual, he transformed daily life into a living expression of faith. AKHENTENN became a luminous city of ideology, where sunlight, human action, and divine devotion were inseparably intertwined. The hidden letters preserved beneath palace floors testify to the intellectual, spiritual, and emotional labor required to maintain such a city, revealing a pharaoh's extraordinary commitment to his vision. The city functioned as a tangible experiment in faith. Streets, terraces, altars, and temples instructed citizens through experience and observation. Festivals, art, and ritual reinforced principles embedded in space and time. Letters documented the ongoing orchestration of belief, revealing the complexity of maintaining a society devoted entirely to a single deity. Akhenaten's oversight ensured that the city remained functional, radiant, and ideologically coherent, a unique achievement in human history that continues to captivate centuries later. In the convergence of sunlight, architecture, ritual, and correspondence, the brilliance and fragility of Akhenaten's reign are revealed. AKHENTENN was both triumph and trial, a city where divine vision and human behavior intersected in daily life. Hidden letters speak across millennia, providing insight into a ruler who dared to challenge tradition, reorder belief, and create a society in which ordinary actions became acts of devotion, leaving a legacy that resonates long after the sun has set on the city itself. The afternoon sun fell across AKHENTENN, highlighting terraces, temples, and streets in golden light. Akhenaten's letters from this period reveal a ruler deeply aware of the fragility of faith. Even as the city shines, hearts may wander unseen. Let guidance endure beyond my voice. He writes, showing both vigilance and care. Faith was not enforced. It had to be nurtured daily through ritual, observation, and example. Nefertiti's influence remained vital. She mediated disputes, guided royal daughters, and ensured that festivals, ceremonies, and daily routines reinforced devotion. Together, their leadership transformed AKHENTENN into a living organism, where citizens participated, consciously or not, in sustaining ideology. Streets, temples, and courtyards acted as instruments of instruction, while reliefs and statues conveyed theological principles, embedding faith into the environment itself. Resistance lingered beneath the city's golden streets. Secret altars, clandestine worship, and adherence to older gods reminded the pharaoh that devotion required vigilance. Letters show careful strategies: public reinforcement of Aten worship, subtle correction, and oversight to maintain cohesion. Festivals, music, dance, and ritual strengthened participation, ensuring that ideology was woven into daily life. AKHENTEN functioned as a living, breathing experiment in devotion. Every gesture, routine, and ceremony was part of a system designed to align hearts with Aten. Letters preserve the meticulous work required to maintain this city of faith, revealing a ruler balancing vision, practicality, and human imperfection. Akhenaten's legacy endures not only in stone and art, but in these intimate texts, offering a glimpse into the mind of a pharaoh who sought to transform civilization itself. Twilight descended on AKHENTEN, and the city glimmered with fading light and shadows. Akhenaten's letters reveal the emotional weight of leadership. Though the city glows, some hearts may stray. My vigilance must remain, my guidance extend beyond presence. Even at the height of his architectural and spiritual creation, he understood that faith required constant cultivation. Nefertiti's role remained indispensable. She guided rituals, organized festivals, and ensured that daily life reflected devotion. Together, their partnership maintained the ideological coherence of the city, turning streets, temples, and courtyards into living instruments of instruction. Art, reliefs, and statues reinforced spiritual principles, teaching citizens through visual and performative cues. Despite apparent unity, resistance persisted. Secret worship, private adherence to traditional gods, and hidden altars reminded the pharaoh that devotion was fragile. Letters detail strategies of careful observation, subtle intervention, and public ritual reinforcement, ensuring the ideological fabric remained intact. Daily routines, from labor to ceremony, became instruments of teaching, embedding faith into the rhythm of life. Festivals continued to educate and inspire. Music, dance, and ritual synchronized civic and spiritual life, with the royal family performing as exemplars. Letters meticulously planned these celebrations, detailing timing, choreography, and spatial arrangement to maximize impact. AKHENTEN stood as both triumph and trial. Its brilliance depended as much on human hearts as on sunlight and architecture. The letters preserved today reveal a ruler balancing vision, practicality, and human imperfection. Akhenaten's audacious reforms transformed the city into a living experiment in faith, offering a window into a pharaoh determined to reshape civilization through devotion, vigilance, and relentless guidance. Night fell over AKHENTEN, the city bathed in torchlight and shadow. Akhenaten's letters reveal the constant vigilance required to sustain his radical vision. Even in darkness, my watch continues. Hearts may falter unseen, yet the city must endure as a testament to the light. Faith, he understood, was fragile and demanded continuous guidance. Nefertiti's influence remained critical. She ensured ceremonies, festivals, and daily routines reflected Aten worship. The royal family's presence acted as a constant exemplar of devotion, blending spiritual guidance with civic leadership. Streets, temples, and courtyards conveyed divine instruction, while art and reliefs reinforced theological principles, embedding faith into everyday life. Hidden resistance persisted. Secret altars, private rituals, and adherence to old gods challenged the pharaoh's reforms. Letters reveal subtle strategies to maintain cohesion. Careful observation, reinforcement of public rituals, and subtle intervention. Even daily routines, labor, and civic participation were orchestrated to strengthen devotion. Festivals united citizens in ritual, music, and dance, reinforcing belief and loyalty. Letters document precise choreography, timing, and spatial arrangements, showing how performance and participation reinforced the ideological structure. Citizens were continuously engaged in a system of education, instruction, and spiritual cultivation. AKHENTEN functioned as a living organism, where human behavior, art, ritual, and architecture merged seamlessly. Even in the absence of sunlight, faith could be sustained through deliberate design, guidance, and oversight. Letters preserved across millennia reveal a ruler acutely aware of human imperfection, whose vision demanded both brilliance and meticulous care. Ultimately, Akhenaten's hidden correspondence illuminates a city where devotion and daily life were inseparable. The pharaoh's experiment in faith, leadership, and human guidance remains a testament to audacity, vigilance, and vision, offering insight into a ruler determined to leave an enduring mark on history. The first light of dawn crept over Akhenaten, spilling gold across temples, streets, and terraces. The city, meticulously aligned to the sun, seemed to breathe with quiet precision. Akhenaten's letters reveal a ruler both visionary and aware of the fragility of human hearts. The sun rises, and yet I watch for faltering devotion. My guidance must endure beyond my voice, he writes, capturing the intimate weight of leadership. Faith, he understood, could not be commanded. It had to be nurtured, observed, and guided. Nefertiti's influence remained central, mediating disputes, instructing the royal daughters, and translating Akhenaten's theological principles into actionable practices. Together, they ensured that Akhenaten functioned as a living organism, its citizens participating, consciously or not, in sustaining ideology through daily life. Streets, temples, and courtyards became instruments of faith, guiding movement and behavior, while art, reliefs, and statues served as continuous teachers, reinforcing divine principles. Resistance quietly persisted. Secret altars, private adherence to traditional gods, and clandestine rituals reminded the pharaoh that loyalty required vigilance. Festivals and daily routines reinforced the city's spiritual cohesion, with music, dance, and ritual creating immersive experiences that educated and inspired citizens. Letters detail precise instructions for timing, choreography, and civic participation, ensuring lessons were internalized. Akhenaten was both triumph and trial, brilliance and vulnerability. Letters preserved beneath palace floors reveal a ruler who dared to challenge tradition, reorder belief, and embed devotion into the very fabric of life. Even as sunlight illuminated the city, shadows of doubt and imperfection remained, highlighting the delicate balance between vision, human behavior, and faith. Akhenaten's legacy is preserved not only in stone and art, but in these intimate documents, offering a window into the mind of a pharaoh determined to transform civilization. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Akhenaten, illuminating temples, terraces, and streets with golden brilliance. Akhenaten's hidden letters from this period reveal a ruler who understood the delicate balance of faith and human behavior. I have built a city of light, yet I know the hearts of men are fragile, he wrote, acknowledging that ideological coherence required constant care and vigilance. Nefertiti remained indispensable, guiding ceremonies, mediating disputes, and sustaining the royal family's spiritual presence. Together, they ensured the city's life was a continuous embodiment of devotion, a place where ideology, art, and civic activity merged seamlessly. Streets and temples were aligned to the sun, laborers moved in rhythm with divine timing, and daily routines reinforced faith. Artistic expression continued to teach and inspire. Reliefs and statues depicted devotion in precise detail, reflecting Akhenaten's insistence that even visual representation could guide behavior. Festivals orchestrated music, dance, and ritual to unite citizens, creating moments where instruction and awe intertwined. Letters reveal meticulous planning of these events, reinforcing the city's spiritual coherence. Resistance persisted beneath Akhenaten's golden streets. Priests of Ammonius performed hidden rituals, and nobles clung to old gods, requiring strategic intervention. Letters illustrate the pharaoh's delicate balancing act: public reinforcement of faith, subtle correction of dissent, and continuous vigilance. Akhenaten was a living, breathing experiment in devotion, where daily life, ritual, and human action fused into a unified system. Letters reveal both brilliance and vulnerability, showing that the city's light depended on human hearts as much as on stone and sun. Akhenaten's vision endured in the choreography of the city, in its art, festivals, and rituals, a legacy of audacious ambition and meticulous care. Twilight fell over Akhenaten, and the city shimmered between fading light and emerging shadows. Akhenaten's letters from this period capture the weight of his final reflections. The city glows, yet hearts may stray unseen. My words must guide devotion beyond my presence. Even at the height of his architectural and ideological creation, he recognized the fragility of faith and the necessity of vigilance. Nefertiti's counsel remained vital. She ensured that rituals, festivals, and daily routines embodied devotion, guiding both the royal family and citizens. Together, their leadership transformed AKHENTEN into a living organism, where behavior, space, and ideology intertwined. Streets, temples, and altars encoded principles of Aten worship, while festivals and artistic works reinforced them. Reliefs and statues acted as continuous teachers, ensuring that faith permeated daily life. Even amidst this brilliance, hidden resistance endured. Secret altars, clandestine worship, and adherence to old gods required subtle oversight. Letters reveal Akhenaten's careful strategies: observation, public ritual reinforcement, and nuanced correction to maintain ideological cohesion. Daily life itself became an instrument of devotion, embedding faith into the rhythms of labor, art, and ceremony. Ultimately, AKHENTEN stood as both triumph and trial. Its brilliance relied as much on human hearts as on sunlit stone. Letters preserved across millennia reveal a pharaoh who challenged tradition, reordered belief, and transformed daily existence into acts of devotion. The city, its rituals, and its correspondence testify to a vision that endured far beyond Akhenaten's lifetime, offering a window into the audacious mind of a ruler determined to reshape the spiritual and civic world around him.